welcome to the August 11th, 2022 special meeting of the Boulder City Council. We're going to get started with a few announcements here. So if we can get those up on the screen, please. COVID-19 testing and vaccinations. So for information and provider locations for free COVID-19 testing, go to www.boco.org/COVID testing. Our Boulder site is at 2445 Stasio Drive, and that's open 7 days a week from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And for vaccine information and provider locations, please go to www.boco.org/COVID vaccine. Our next announcement is about Zero Fare for Better Air August. So during the entire month of August, RTD will offer zero fares across its system as part of the Zero Fare for Better Air initiative. This collaborative statewide initiative made possible by Colorado's Senate Bill 22180 in partnership with the Colorado Energy Office is designed to reduce ground level ozone by increasing use of public transit. Current RTD customers will also benefit as you will not have to purchase or use fare products from August 1st to the 31st during Colorado's high ozone season. So by taking advantage of free transit in August, you can save money on gas and parking, avoid the frustration of driving in traffic, help improve air quality by reducing single occupant vehicle traffic, or use your commute to catch up on work, listen to music, or read a book. And for more information, please visit the RTD site at www.rtddenver.com/zerofare. And before we move on to the next slide, I'll just add a group of us from the Northwest Mayor and Commissioner Coalition did a joint ride along with city staff and county staff from Boulder down to Denver a couple days ago. And let me just say, it was smooth, it was clean, it was safe, it was fun. It was just a great ride all around. And so just to encourage very much anyone to just hop on the bus. If you haven't recently or haven't at all, give it a try. It works out really, really well. Okay, next announcement, please. Text up. Okay, so just recently we had the post office dedication for Officer Eric Talley. So March 22nd, 2021 is a date that will be forever seared in the collective memory of our community. On that Monday afternoon, while carrying out ordinary grocery store visits, 10 community members lost their lives. And likely more would have fallen victim if not for an extraordinary act of bravery from one of our own officers, Eric Talley, who risked his life and paid the ultimate price. In honor of his courage, Congressperson Joe Neguse has made expedient work to rename Boulder's downtown post office after Officer Talley. And we thank Congressperson Neguse very much for supporting our collective healing by making this one of the fastest post office renamings in congressional history. This dedication will serve as a perpetual reminder of Officer Talley's rich life, dedicated service, and sacrifice. His memory will live on in the hearts and minds of our impacted community members. And for those who never knew him, those who make other ordinary errands, they will notice their trips to the post office is commemorated by one of Boulder's finest. We're very grateful for that from Congressperson Neguse. That brings our announcements to a close. So I will go ahead and call this meeting to order and ask Alicia if you could call the roll, please.
Yes, sir. And good evening, everyone. Councilmember Benjamin.
Present.
Mayor Brockett.
Present.
Councilmember Folkerts.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Friend.
Here.
Councilmember Joseph.
Present.
Spear.
Present.
Wallach.
Here.
Councilmember Weiner is absent, and Councilmember Yates.
Right here.
Mayor, we have our quorum.
Thank you, Alicia. And I'll just note that Councilmember Tara Weiner had a death in her family, unfortunately, and is not able to be here tonight because she's attending the funeral. So we send our condolences and send her family our best wishes. Okay, so we're going to start off, and I will note that today is a special meeting, so we're not having open comment tonight because of that. And we're going to start with a COVID-19 hybrid council meeting discussion. Alicia?
That is number 1A on tonight's agenda, sir, the COVID-19 and hybrid council meeting discussion.
Thank you so much, Alicia. And I'm going to turn it right over to the incomparable Assistant City Manager, Pam Davis, for a quick little report.
Hi, good evening all, and it's great to greet you at 6 p.m. So thank you very much for that. Pam Davis, Assistant City Manager. My pronouns are she, her. I don't have a formal presentation tonight in light of some of our previous discussions this summer, but I do have a little bit of information to review prior to tee up your discussion. So tonight, our goal is to establish direction from you all whether to officially commence our fully hybrid council meetings. As of today's data update from the CDC, our county has now sustained a medium risk level for 3 straight weeks in a row, with our 7-day case average falling well below 200 cases per 100,000 people. During your late July process discussion, you had directed us to come back to set a date for allowing in-person participation during regular meetings, once again after we reached this data milestone. And previously, you had already made the decision to maintain that study sessions and special meetings would remain virtual, but that regular meetings would begin a hybrid format. So before I raise just the 2 basic questions we have for you tonight, I have just a couple of more pieces of information that I believe was requested at the last meeting, as well as some information about what the rest of the organization and our city staff is doing. So the first piece of information is that now that we are at medium risk level, the city is fully implementing our own hybrid work policy for our city staff. That will fully take effect on August 22nd and will bring previously teleworking employees back to the office a minimum of 2 days per week. And we will continue to maintain all in-person services that are open to the community with no plans to make further operational shifts due to COVID. The only situation we might envision that would be additional public health orders from our partners at the county and the state. The second piece of information is that there were questions just around our peer cities in the area and what others were doing as far as their council meetings. I can confirm for certain that we are the only city in the Boulder County region that is still hosting virtual council meetings. Our other cities nearby have begun returning to in-person meetings. The only exception to that is the Boulder County Commission. And as I mentioned, that is not due to COVID concerns. That is due to technology issues and supply chain issues that are plaguing us all. And so their intention is as soon as they can get their room sorted out and their technology, they will also be in person. And then finally, there were some questions for our facilities team as it related to air exchange in chambers and what we've done to accommodate that space in light of what we've learned about COVID. I can confirm our team in facilities has maximized the air exchange in chambers. So that involves adjusting kind of the outdoor dampers and things like that. What they've done is essentially mimic outdoor conditions by maximizing the air exchange per hour so that outside air is brought in and inside air is recycled back out of the building. In addition to that, we do have 2 portable HEPA filtration units that will be on site and available for use during meetings to increase that circulation even further. So with that, and I'm happy to answer additional questions, our question for you is, are you now interested in transitioning to a hybrid meeting that will allow council to convene in person along with presenters and support staff? And if yes, what date would you like to start? We would be prepared for the September 1st regular meeting or later based on your wishes. The second question will be, when you do return to person, do you wish for members of the public to be welcomed back to attend and participate in meetings right away while maintaining our virtual options, or would you like to phase them in after you all get settled back into the hybrid environment? And with that, Mayor, I will turn it back over to you for discussion.
Thanks so much, Pam. Appreciate all that information. Okay, so I'll just open the floor to comments. And I think before we pretty much said that once we hit yellow, we would start looking at coming back into person, but of course things can change. But if somebody wants to offer a comment, get us started. Rachel? Matt.
Probably to the surprise of no one watching, I will advocate for June 1st. And I would say it's been a long time since we got to welcome the public into chambers as well. So happy to have public come back at that point too.
Yeah.
I don't want to correct my colleague, but did she mean June 1st or September 1st?
I probably meant September 1st. I wanted to do it June 1st.
Retroactive. I like the retroactive.
Of 2021. So I'm gonna go with September 1st of 2022. Sorry about that.
No worries. Yeah, I support us going back into hybrid September 1st. I would though like to phase the public in, right? I mean, we dropped like flies on our second in-person meeting. So I would like to maybe give us a chance to work some of those kinks out before welcoming the public back. So, but yeah, September for us in person, and then phase the public in 1 or 2 regular meetings after that.
Nicole?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask staff if you all have a preference. I know before when we tried coming back before most of us got COVID, you would wanted a little bit of time to make sure that everything was working with council back before the public came back. Are you feeling completely comfortable, everybody coming back at the same time now, or would a meeting or so be helpful in that transition?
I'm happy to weigh in. I think we're ready if that were the case, but we'd always appreciate perhaps a meeting or 2 just to make sure that the flow for you all is fine as we come in. So that would be great, but also defer to the preferences of council. If it's just up to staff, I'll say that I think it'll be nice to have a meeting or 2 under our belt as we start to think about inviting more hybrid and in public and in person in.
Thank you.
Nicole, do you want to opine on what we should do?
Oh, yeah, I think just hearing that then I would have a slight preference for giving staff just that little bit of time to make sure everything is worked out. It's a slight preference, not a strong preference, but it does sound like it may be easier for staff to go that way.
I'll jump
and
on.
also I'm happy to jump back in September. That sounds good to me. I miss you all.
Thanks, Nicole. Okay, Junie, go ahead, then I'll say something.
Thank you, Aaron. I am happy to go back in September 1st. And I like the phasing approach. But my question to staff is, even with the phasing approach, will we keep going the hybrid for the foreseeable future for people who cannot make it to council?
Thanks for the question, Councilmember Joseph, and the answer is yes. So our intention is to maintain hybrid in perpetuity. We've recognized a lot of benefits to accessibility to meetings, to dealing with those issues that come up that require folks to not be able to come in person. So, and we also want to respect those who choose to remain more distant. So for all of those reasons, yes.
And so, Junie, do you want to opine as well on what you'd like to do?
No, thank you. I really appreciate the fact that we'll give staff the opportunity to phase this process in, and also doing it for the foreseeable future, because I remember when I first got on council, one of our council member was always advocating for actually having either what do we call it? Some type of services for parents because to help them. But I think having hybrid meeting is going to take care of some aspect of that. So thank you so much.
Great. Oops, sorry about the dog there. I'll just add in. All right. I'm good with September 1st as well, and phasing in with the public in a meeting or 2 after that. So I'll just put that out. Any objections? And let me let the dog out, and then I'll check.
Children and pets is what we're all used to in this new hybrid normal, right?
Okay, were there any objections while I let the dog out? No. Okay, great. So does that give you what you need, Pam? Great.
Yes, it absolutely does. And we'll follow up if there's any sort of final reorientation support that you all need as you come back in September.
Excellent. And I'll just say one of the things that I'm most excited about this is that my dog may be barking a lot. And if we're in person, it won't matter. Great. Well, thanks so much for your help. And Pam, again, apologies for the missing you at the last meeting and keeping you late for that. So appreciate you coming back today.
It's all good. I don't like missing any of a council meeting anyway, so it's no worries. Thank you.
All right, the glutton for punishment. Good to know. Okay, great. So Alicia, can we move into our one other agenda item of the night? Well, actually, let me just pause for a moment here because Rachel had asked us to chat about something at the end of the meeting. So I'll just point out that we will have a chance to check in on that, Rachel, briefly at the end of the meeting, but we'll get to that when we get to that. But the only regularly scheduled item on our meeting tonight is one public hearing. So Alicia, if you could take us there, please.
Of course, sir. Thank you. Our item tonight under the public hearings is our second reading and public hearings on the following ballot items. We have first the second reading and consideration of a motion to adopt Ordinance 8534, which is related to the annexation of CU South. The second item is the motion to adopt Ordinance 8539, and that is related to updating the charter if the library district is formed through the county ballot. Item number 3 is the motion to adopt Ordinance 8540, which is related to prohibiting running for more than one office. Item number 4 is the second reading and motion to adopt Ordinance 8546 related to converting our elections to even years. And the last item under the public hearing tonight is the motion to adopt Ordinance 8542, which is related to the climate action tax.
With that, I believe we're going straight to Kathy. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Kathy Haddock with the City Attorney's Office, and I am going to do a very high-level review of the ordinances and what they contain in them. But the real experts and people that have worked on this are also on the phone and will be able to answer any of your questions as we go through. And I believe Lisa or Emily is running my presentation too. And we are going to be going through 5 ordinances for 6 ballot titles. There are one of the ordinance for the climate tax has both the ballot title for the tax and for the debt authorization in it. So next slide, please. For all these ordinances, the ordinance describes the code or charter changes that would go into effect if the measure passes, and they contain the actual ballot language. Of course, voting to put something on the ballot does not mean that you support or oppose the measure, just that you're voting to put it on. Next slide, please. The first ordinance is Ordinance 8534. This is a referendum on CU South. This is on the ballot because the committee presented a referendum petition with sufficient signatures to put on the ballot whether or not to repeal Ordinance 8483 regarding the annexation of CU South. Council's required to put it on law at this next meeting or this next election because it's a November election. The original ordinance was adopted by emergency, so the annexation has been recorded and the parties are implementing the terms of the ordinance and agreement. The language that is in your ordinance as the ballot language is the same as appeared on each page of the referendum petition. I know that during this week you got an alternative suggestion by the referendum committee for that. I am concerned about that summary not being accurate, and the statement of the effect is different than what the charter says the effect will be if it was done. So recommend you stay with the language that is in the ordinance that's in front of you. Next slide, please. 8539 is the library district provisions. The charter has several provisions about the library, including requirements for tax dedication for library commission and budgeting that will affect you this year. So this is on the ballot because a group of library advocates did get the measure of forming a library district put on the ballot in the county's ballot in November. So in order for the city not to be between a rock and a hard place, if it is adopted, we are also putting the library measure on the ballot now. It does not go into effect unless the voters form the library district. If the voters do form the library district, then the city question would repeal all the charter provisions about the library and allow the council to negotiate an intergovernmental agreement with the new library district during the transition. During that time, council gets to choose how to fund and operate the library, and they could determine to do it the same way that the charter currently requires, but this measure will allow them to make the decisions that are best for transition rather than operating a library. Next slide, please. The next ordinance is 8540 that's clarifying things for candidates in the charter. One clarification is there can only be one candidate. I'm sorry, one person can only be a candidate for one office at an election. So that means if a council member wants to run for mayor and their seat is not, I'm sorry, try to say this super clear. If a council member wants to run for mayor, of course, they could run for mayor on an election year when their term ends and they just be running for mayor. They would not be running for council. That doesn't require a change. The thing that requires a change is if a council member is in the middle of their 4-year term and want to run for mayor, this provision doesn't require them to give up their council seat unless they win the mayor seat. And then if they do win the mayor seat, they resign their council seat. The candidate that received the 5th highest number of votes at the election would fill that person's unexpired term, the newly elected mayor's unexpired term. The other change that this makes is it changes the swearing-in date of elected candidates from the 3rd Tuesday in November to the first business meeting in December. That's so that the swearing-in of new candidates is for sure after all the ballot results have been certified, and even gives some time for onboarding between the time of certification of ballots and the first business meeting in December. Although even still, it doesn't give much time. Next ordinance, or next slide, please. Excuse me. This next ordinance is what would implement if approved by the voters, moving to even year elections. There were several processes considered by council, and this is the one that was selected to put on the ballot. It changes the regular municipal election from odd years to even years starting in 2026. In order to get offices set up between here and now, for the mayor, the first mayor directly elected in 2023 would get a 3-year term rather than the 2-year term plan now. So they would serve until 2026. Then for the mayor elected in 2026 and every even numbered year after that, they'd only get a 2-year term. For the council members to get to even numbered years, the members elected in 2023 would get 3-year terms to 2026. The members elected in 2025 would get 3-year terms to 2028. And then every candidate and every council member that is elected in 2026 or after an even numbered years would get 4-year terms. Next slide, please. This is the climate tax slide that we talked about. This imposes a new climate tax that is levied like the utility occupation tax is levied now, which means that it would be $6.5 million on the provider of electric and natural gas services starting January 1st. Right now, the only provider of electric and natural gas service is Xcel. The $6.5 million would adjust annually by the CPI starting January 1st of 2024. The ballot issue also repeals the existing utility occupation tax on December 31st, 2022. So basically sunsetting it early, and also sunsets the cap tax early. The ordinance includes the changes to the code that would become effective if the issue passes. And then it lists all the types of services that or programs that can be done with the revenues from the tax. The general statement of the revenues is that they're used to maintain and expand climate-focused programs and services, including wildfire resistance, financing capital projects, and stabilizing fundings for the initiatives to meet the city goals. And then there's a much more detailed list of examples in the ballot itself. Next slide, please. For the debt question on that same ordinance, it authorizes debt up to $52.9 million. That's the debt that could be issued anticipating that the debt would use $5 million per year to pay back the debt service, and the term of the debt would be 15 years. The maximum repayment cost would not exceed $75 million. That's principal and interest. The use of debt proceeds are the same as climate tax revenues. It also allows for the city to do a backup pledge from the general fund. We don't anticipate having to use it because the bonds are being pictured to be paid back with $5 million of the revenue. There is 6.5. So, we've got a super buffer there. So not anticipated that it need to be used, but we would get the city's rating, which would reduce the interest cost so that the money would be less expensive to borrow. The debt would be to accelerate the projects and programs to reach the climate goals rather than paying as you go. And it's important to remember that the voters are authorizing the maximum amounts. Council ultimately makes a decision when bonds are issued about whether all or only some of that debt is issued, the length of the bonds, the timing. They can also narrow the use of the proceeds. All of those things are determination by council afterwards. Basically, the voters define the box and council gets to determine how they're going to use in the box. Next slide, please. So that's all I have for a high level presentation. I'm happy to answer questions now, or I believe I and everybody else will be here after the public hearing.
Thanks so much, Kathy. Well, let's just say if council members do have any questions, and right now let's go through those before we turn to the public hearing. I've got Bob and then Mark.
Thanks, Kathy. That was very, very helpful. Kathy, I think I heard you say, but I wanted to maybe have you reiterate or clarify. With respect to the ballot measure, I don't remember the number, the ballot measure that relates to the CU South referendum, that one is not discretionary by council. In other words, we are acting as administrators on that one because a petition with adequate signatures was delivered, and we must vote yes on that one. Is that correct?
Correct. It doesn't say it as blatantly as you must vote yes, but there is not a way for it. We have to do it. And so, yes, you are doing your administrative duty. It's not discretionary.
Thank you, Kathy.
Mark and Rachel.
Yeah, Kathy, two questions. First, with respect to the CU South, are any clarifying language changes possible, or are we simply stuck with what has been petitioned for and received the adequate number of signatures?
The council decides what the ballot title is going to be, what's going to be on the ballot. So you can change it if you want. The guidelines that you have is that it has to be clear and concise. It can't include arguments for and against.
No, but is it possible to pull up the CU South language at this point, or is that not?
Yes, and I'm not sure if it's Emily or Lisa, but that would be slide 10.
Okay.
And actually, I have the wording that on this slide, the wording that the referendum committee asked for. Slide, you were right the first time. Back up. Thank you. So what is on the ballot now is should Ordinance 8483 regarding the annexation of CU South be repealed.
That's it.
That's it.
Okay, that's fine. My second question is on the climate action tax. Did I correctly read the memo where it suggested, or at least to me suggested, that Excel will actually determine the allocation among residential, commercial, and industrial properties?
Yes. Yes, the tax is actually levied on Excel, but they are allowed to pass it on to customers. So
we cannot inform the community as to what the actual tax consequence will be. I mean, I don't think they would do it, but in theory, Excel could say, let's dump it all on the consumers, or let's dump it all on the industrial properties. Do they have that freedom?
In theory, but Carolyn Elam, I see, has come up and she can answer it more directly because there are limitations on them being able to do that.
Okay.
Yes, and it's a really good question, Councilmember Wallach. Currently, again, we're using the utility occupation tax mechanism, and it's allocated equally based on revenues that are collected. So depending on what a customer's bill is, it's effectively a sales tax rate as Excel applies it. So they don't necessarily take discretion to say we're going to bill residents at 8% and commercial businesses at 2%. It's the same effective tax rate. They just have to figure out what the tax rate is based on what their projected revenues are for the year. We also anticipate providing additional guidance to them because we tell them and we levy the tax on them. And we have the ability to provide guidance as to how we expect that to be levied, to include the exemptions that we've identified for recipients of energy assistance financing, as well as potentially addressing the fact that they do not collect all the revenues associated with natural gas use. So we do anticipate providing that guidance. So what we've presented in the memo as the effective tax rates or average tax rates are intended to be applied.
Okay, and have we had any of those conversations yet with Excel?
We have scheduled meetings with them to start to affect the changes or anticipation of a tax approval, so it can go into effect January 1st as planned.
Carolyn, thank you.
Rachel?
Thank you. I had a couple questions. First, I'm looking at CU South 8483. I think the same language is in all of these, but just wondering about it. Section 5 reads, this ordinance is necessary to protect the public health, safety, and welfare of residents of the city and covers matters of local concern. If that is to say that repealing annexation is necessary to, like, if a yes vote would be necessary to protect public health, safety, and welfare, and that's the opposite of the truth. People could die if this referendum measure passes. So what's that language mean?
And I'll, I don't know if Teresa wants to jump in here too. I'll take a first stab at it, but we do put that in all ordinances, and no, it does not mean that saying yes on the ballot measure is in the best interest of public health and safety. It's saying putting this measure before the votes is, and it's more of a legal requirement. So Teresa's probably going to be able to give you a more clear answer.
May I colloquy with you on, Rachel, on that for a second? Kathy, shouldn't there be language that says in effect that the petitioners believe it is necessary for life, health, and safety, as opposed to the blanket statement that it is?
Or we could, another alternative is we could say, if you wanted, that it's putting this measure on the ballot is required by law and therefore necessary. I mean, we could talk about what it actually is, because I don't know that we ever want to give the implication by you adopting ordinances to put things on the ballot that you're advocating a vote for or against.
Yeah,
and check while Teresa's answering too, because I believe there's charter requirements for this language, and I'm going to check what they are.
And I'm just going to, before Teresa answers Mark's question, if I may, I don't know that we can know whether petitioners think that this is necessary for health, safety, and welfare. Like, they may just, prefer it, but not think that. And I don't think their referendum necessarily said that. So I wouldn't want to put those words in their mouth necessarily. I'm positive I don't want these words out of my mouth, if I could avoid it, to say that it is necessary. And I'm sorry to bring this up at the last minute. I just noticed it on my last read through these.
So Kathy's exactly right on this, in that what we're saying is putting this question on the ballot is necessary for health safety. And Kathy's having a look to see if she can identify a charter provision that requires this. But it is not a statement at all about the substance of the measure so much as putting the measure on the ballot.
Well, I guess I just would not want somebody to casually read this and be like, oh, council says that this referendum is necessary to protect the public health, safety, and welfare. And I wouldn't want anybody to point to that as any indication that we think that, because I can't say that everybody on council agrees with me, but I think the opposite is true. So I'm just concerned.
We could add language to clarify.
Do you mind if I just jump in here? That sounds like Kathy's looking stuff up. We've got a good public hearing coming up. Maybe we could return to this question after the public hearing with the benefit of Kathy's research at that time. Right, Rachel, would that work for you?
That sounds great. And I had one or two other questions.
Okay, go ahead, and then we'll go to Jeannie.
Okay. In the, let's see, Ordinance 8546, where we are cleaning up some issues, I think, attendant to even number years. There's language in here that changes to say the mayor shall serve until a successor is duly chosen and qualified. I guess like, what if nobody runs for mayor? Like shall sounds like, I mean, if I was the sitting mayor, I'm not necessarily wanting to serve longer. So I just wanted to vet what that is saying. The mayor shall serve.
Well, the mayor elected, the terms don't change with the people. So for instance, if somebody resigns January 1st, the term still goes to the following November or whenever the November was going to go. So the reference is to the term. It's not indentured servitude. And that's what we were trying to correct, to make it not indentured servitude. So we're talking about the term goes 2 years. If the person wants to resign, they are allowed to. Its charter doesn't require it. Now, your question about whether nobody runs for mayor is not something that I believe is addressed.
Okay. But maybe we'll hear back from you on that one then. Thanks.
Great. Junie, did you still have a question?
I did have a comment instead of a question of making, but you're saying that you're going to come back to Rachel's question. But my thought is the ballot measure language. Did we work with, the petitioners on that language? And if we're going to change it, do we need to go back to them and have that discussion so that there is no, how do I put it, a sense of that we're not doing a goodwill toward them?
Right. What the charter requires is that there is an initiative that the council has to, the staff has to consult with the committee about but not for a referendum. There's no requirement to do that. And we did not do it for this one. We just took their language off of their petitions.
And I don't think I'm asking that we change their petition language at all. Or language, I'm talking about the sort of boilerplate of ours that's on all of these initiatives, right? That subsection 5 appears on all the ordinances we're looking at tonight.
Correct.
So that's the piece I'm looking at. Thanks.
Thank you, Erin.
Thanks, Junie. All right, seeing no other questions, how about we proceed to the public hearing? We've got 47 people signed up to speak. And Ryan, are you going to talk about our rules of decorum and such?
Yes, Mayor, thank you so much. And Emily, thank you for pulling up those slides here. We're grateful to each of the community members here tonight to speak to the public hearing. And I'll pause for a moment as we get those slides up here. And we want to be sure that everyone knows that the city has engaged with community members to co-create a vision for productive, meaningful, inclusive civic conversations. And we want to make sure that this vision supports physical and emotional safety for community members, staff, and council, as well as democracy for people of all ages, identities, lived experiences, and political perspectives. Anyone interested in learning more about this vision can visit the website shown here. We can move to the next slide, please. And I want to share a few examples of rules of decorum found in the Boulder Revised Code and other guidelines that do support this vision and that will be upheld during this meeting. During the public hearing, all remarks and testimony shall be limited to matters related to city business. No participant shall make threats or use other forms of intimidation against any person. Obscenity, racial epithets, and other speech and behavior that disrupts or otherwise impedes the ability to conduct the meeting are prohibited. And participants are required to sign up to speak using the name they're commonly known by. Individuals must display their whole name before being allowed to speak online. If only your first name is showing up in Zoom, please use the Q&A feature in Zoom to share your whole name. And please know that only audio testimony is currently permitted. Thank you.
More dog drama. Okay, So like I say, we have 47 people signed up to speak. Each of them will get 2 minutes. And since we do have a few different ballot items that are on here, I would recommend that folks be clear about which ballot item they're talking about in their testimony. All right, let's go ahead and get launched right in here. Our first 3 speakers are Leslie Glustrom, Eric Budd, and Spencer Wilcox. So Leslie, you can lead us off.
Good evening, Council. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you so much for holding the public hearing, and mostly thank you for your service to the community. Obviously, we're not all going to agree a lot of the time, but it doesn't matter. I am so grateful to you all for your hard work, so thank you so much. And of course, to the staff for everything they've done. I'll speak briefly about 3 of the ballot measures. And obviously, I think they're all going to go on the ballot, and then we can have a really big, robust community discussion. And there you go, that's Boulder, so that'll be fun. Starting with the CU South Annexation, Ordinance 8534. I am very grateful this is going on the ballot. I'm very sympathetic to the concerns about flooding. I'm sympathetic to the assumption that somehow the only way we can address the flooding is by working with CU and letting them put a lot of building into our best floodplain, frankly. And I don't think those are good assumptions. So let's have that discussion again. Let's really think about it. And let's not assume that CU has to build there or that we have to do the annexation in order to get flood control. None of those assumptions actually have to be if CU would see the world differently. And I think they should, because education is going to be very different in this century than it was in the last century. I think bricks and mortar will be much less important, so let's not destroy our excellent floodplain for some bricks and mortar. On even year elections, I'm opposed to even year elections. I know a lot of the council is for them, but I would really like to see these robust discussions for local measures. And finally, on the cap tax, thank you so much. This is obviously just the beginning. Really appreciate the work that staff has done to get us to this point. Going forward, I am hoping that council will, I know you've had so many issues, but please engage, make sure we have strong metrics, that we have strong community engagement on strategic planning. Let's not have positions down at the Public Utilities Commission that say, Boulder says this, without actually asking the community. So thank you so much, council. I appreciate it very much.
Thanks, Leslie. Next, we have Eric Budd, Spencer Wilcox, and Andrew Harris.
Thank you, Boulder City Council, for moving forward with a measure that will protect and strengthen Boulder's democracy. I fully support the efforts to move our municipal elections to even years. When I first wanted to understand moving elections to even years, I found a really incredible book. The book is called Timing and Turnout, How Off-Cycle Elections Favor Organized Groups by Sarah F. Anzia, Associate Professor of Public Policy and Political Science at UC Berkeley. And Dr. Anzia writes, moving local elections from off-cycle to the same day as presidential elections is 3 times more effective at increasing voter turnout than the most effective mode of mobilization, which is face-to-face canvassing. And as someone who has knocked thousands of doors in local elections over the years in Boulder, I was really surprised to hear how important on-cycle elections are for turnout in our local elections. And so while Boulder has had off-cycle elections for many decades, we have to accept the simple fact that off-cycle elections suppress the vote. By aligning our local Boulder election date with state and federal elections, we can nearly double the number of people that are participating in our local democracy. And I want to highlight an important detail about that statement. It's not just moving elections to even years that makes a difference. In fact, some cities have elections in the spring of even years, which are also off cycle and suppress the vote. The policy itself is moving elections to align with the state and federal elections. So I would encourage City Council to look and consider updating the ballot question and the charter language to reflect this language as that is the definition of the change rather than moving elections to even years. So thank you again for moving forward with this item. As we have studied when similar measures have been on the ballot in nearly every other city we have researched, it's passed with greater than 60 to 70% of the vote. And we are super excited to help Boulder make this change. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. I understand Spencer Wilcox isn't present, so we're going to go to Andrew Harris, then Sarah Dawn Haynes, and Nick Chrisman.
Hi, everybody. My name is Andrew Harris. I've been in the community for about 6 years, both as a grad student and now as a working professional trying to start a family. Over that time, I've become increasingly involved and invested here in Boulder, including politically via Get Out the Vote efforts with both towns. As a result of both of these things, I strongly support the effort to move municipal elections to even years. As anyone who has participated in Get Out the Vote effort knows, it takes a huge amount of time, money, and effort to actually get people to do the work of voting, checking their registrations, filling out ballots, dropping those ballots off at the time, even with a vote by mail system that beats the pants off of 90% of the country. The national parties all know this. They have both the organizing infrastructure and the media power to rally their prospective voters to the polls every 2 to 4 years, and even they struggle a lot with getting turnout. And all that infrastructure doesn't exist for local elections. So we're compounding this problem and actually driving local turnout by keeping our elections in off years where they essentially provide not another opportunity, but another issue for other people to deal with. At a time where we're reckoning with the impacts of voter suppression at the national level, I think Boulder really has an opportunity to lead the country in engaging or in encouraging voter engagement. Eliminating the additional time and energy needed to organize another year of turnout by aligning municipal elections with the 2-year cycle takes one more speed bump out of the way for prospective voters. That's good for all of us. As a result, I strongly support the measure to move our municipal elections to even years. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Next, we have Sarah Dawn Haynes, Nick Grossman, and Lila Hickey.
Hi everyone, this is Sarah Dawn Haynes of South Boulder. I am really excited to speak to you on these issues and our community. We have a year ago released, or I should say the IPCC released, a daunting report about how little time we have to preserve planetary conditions for our civilization. If emissions continue at their current rate, we likely have 5.5 years until we cross the 1.5 degrees C warming threshold. And that's a significant impetus for us to say no on the repealing CU South and getting our community to be able to live car-free. I also am tired of losing on climate change and housing justice, so I'm going back to grad school, or I'm starting grad school, and I'm going to be studying media and public engagement because we need new tools to engage our community and to educate. And you know, I think starting with even year elections, and I can't support that anymore because it's just, to me, really common sense evolution to include more people. And, you know, we've got to engage our young people in being a part of governance, and they feel really disempowered, and they feel like, you know, the messaging that they don't matter, and the world that we're giving them, you know, is leading to the highest rates of suicide between 10 and 24-year-olds that we've ever seen. So, you know, we need to also support the library, and I know it's out of the council's hands, but I think that that is one of our other great resources for taking care of our community and our planet. Thank you so much.
Rachel?
Mayor, do you mind if I ask Sarah Dawn Haynes a follow-up question?
Go ahead.
Just wanted to clarify. Sarah Dawn, if you're still there, you said, I can't support that anymore about even your elections, and I just wanted to clarify, I interpreted that as you couldn't possibly support it any more than you do, not that you've withdrawn your support from it.
Thank you for clarifying. No, I'm super stoked about the opportunity to engage more voters through even year elections.
I thought based on the rest of your testimony, that's likely what you meant, but just wanted to make sure that everybody understood it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for clarifying.
Clarifying, we'll put you down as super stoked. Okay, next 3 people. We got Nick Grossman, Lila Hickey, and Katie Farnham.
Hello. Imagine that Boulder has always held its city council elections on even years. In that scenario, how do you think Boulder voters would react to a new proposal to switch city council elections to odd years? That would likely be a tough sell for our democratically inclined population. It would be challenging to convince people that it would somehow be better if fewer people were aware that a local election was happening, if a less representative minority of our electorate was responsible for choosing Boulder's representatives. People would ask how having fewer voters participate in our democracy would be more representative of the will of the people, or how it would ensure better outcomes. In response, odd year election advocates might argue that voter quality is better than voter quantity, that only those who have sufficient interest and ability to dedicate some vague but substantial amount of time and effort to extensively research local candidates have somehow earned the exclusive right to vote for Boulder City Council. Proponents of changing Boulder's elections to odd years might claim that doing so would reduce the number of uninformed voters in our local electorate, one of the most educated populations on the planet. People they believe are less inclined to make good choices. However, these so-called uninformed voters are the same Americans we trust to choose our country's president and Congress, Colorado's governor and the state legislator, our Boulder County commissioners, along with city, county, and state ballot measures. Boulder voters would recognize that making participation in city council elections more challenging by moving those to odd years would mean that busy working people and families, people of color, renters, students, and people with lower incomes would have less representation in local decision making. They would realize that a fraction of voters can possibly contribute to as rich a diversity of viewpoints on.
Nick, I'm afraid your time is up, but thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next, we have Lila Hickey, Katie Farnan, and Kevin Mcwilliams.
Hello, council and staff. I'm here to speak in favor of moving Boulder's municipal elections to even years. Modern life is incredible and overwhelming. We have opportunities our grandparents couldn't have dreamed of and have to balance competing priorities they could not have fathomed. The number of things the average American needs to remember and remember to do every day is simply unimaginable in previous eras. Most difficult of all is the constant effort to balance our immediate needs against longer-term goals. For many of us, keeping bills paid, families cared for, and our homes intact is a more than full-time job. So it's no wonder many of us feel a pinch of guilt when we think about the things which are important to us, but simply don't get the time they deserve in our daily schedule. Fighting the climate crisis, spending quality time with the people we love, or volunteering with organizations that improve our communities. Low voter participation is a universally lamented problem in America, and I believe it reflects exactly the challenge I just described. Folks do care, and the increase in voter participation when jurisdictions switch to even-year elections shows this. But life is complicated, and so is voting, even in a state like Colorado. We must track election cycles, candidates, and issues, understand deadlines for registration, address changes, and ballot return, all that without neglecting any of our other responsibilities. Switching to even-year elections allows people to consolidate this process with the national election cycle, while also reducing the likelihood of confusion around calendar dates. Our opportunities are incredible and incredibly complicated. It just doesn't make sense not to simplify everything we can. Let's switch Boulder to even-year elections and make all our lives a tiny bit less complicated. Thank you.
Thank you, Lila. Next, Katie Farnan, Kevin Mcwilliams, and Jill Grano.
Thank you. My name is Katie Farnan. I support the even-year election measure for increasing voter turnout. Washington Post, March 13th, 2021, headline, Arizona GOP lawmaker says the quality of a vote matters. Critics say that's straight out of Jim Crow. Arizona GOP State Rep John Kavanaugh is quoted as follows, "Not everybody wants to vote. And if somebody is uninterested in voting, that probably means they're totally uninformed on the issues. Quantity is important, but we have to look at quality of the votes as well." National Review, April 6, 2021, headline, "Why not fewer voters?" Conservative political commentator Kevin D. Williamson is quoted as follows, Why should we believe that having more people vote is a good thing? Why shouldn't we believe the opposite? That the Republic would be better served by having fewer but better voters. Newsweek, April 7th, 2021, headline, Concerns about uninformed voters smack of Jim Crow. Mississippi GOP Secretary of State Mike Watson is quoted as follows: think of all those woke college university students now who will automatically be registered to vote whether they want to or not. You've got an uninformed citizen who may not be prepared and ready to vote. So, serious question to the council: what the heck is a quality vote? Is it voter age or education? Is it housing status? Is it race? What is it? Is it a vote that's aged like fine wine or cheese? What's the answer? And who's in charge of this quality control anyway? I have questions. The folks who oppose increasing voter participation here have used the quality vote argument, and I really think they should define it. I think people want to know what that is. Thanks.
Thank you, Katie. Next, we have Kevin Mcwilliams, Jill Grano, and Steve Whitaker.
Hello, my name is Kevin Mcwilliams. I'm a 20-year resident of Boulder. Hello, I'm Kevin Mcwilliams. I'm a 20-year resident of Boulder. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to speak tonight in support of moving municipal elections to even years. Democracy in America is under threat today in ways that it has not been since the Civil War, and public trust in the government and the democratic process is at really a dangerous low at this time. Last year, when I was canvassing for Boulder city elections, I had one really common reaction from voters I spoke to about the 2021 election, which was surprise and disappointment that the city chooses to have city council elections on odd years. As others have said, election data shows that turnout in odd year local elections is up to 50% lower than in even year national elections. Many voters, including myself, perceive that this is intended actually as a backdoor way to cut out all but the most committed voters from the process and exclude them from having an influence on city policies that directly affect their daily lives. I think it's very important that every voter in Boulder can feel that their voice is heard and that they are provided a fair chance to participate. Conducting local elections in odd years is directly contradictory to that goal because it relies on the voters having to go out of their way to make sure that they are registered at their current address and then to engage politically outside of the normal even year election cycle. Having separate elections for city council on low turnout years makes Boulder city government less representative of Boulder as a whole, and many voters are discouraged from participating or taking part in city governance by this particular policy. More voters being engaged in the process means more of the public engaged with what the city is doing and generally a more healthy democracy. I think we can all agree that having the greatest number of Boulder voters participating in city elections is better for democracy, and that goal is most directly aided by moving city council elections to even years. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thanks very much, Kevin. Appreciate that. I understand Jill Grano is not in the meeting. So next we have Steve Whitaker, Lisa Sweeney Moran, and Theodore Koenig.
Mayor and members of council, I am Steve Whitaker and a Boulder resident. I'm here to speak in support of putting the new cap tax on the ballot. I'd like to point out that in a recent city-funded survey of nearly 1,200 residents, asking for a ranking of issues in order of importance, it showed respondents ranked addressing climate change impacts well ahead of all other issues, including affordable housing, crime prevention, and homelessness. We are lucky to have a capable and dedicated team in the Climate Initiatives Department, and it's important to provide them with the resources they need to be successful. However, passage of a new climate action tax is not the end of the process to achieving our climate goals. The Climate Initiatives Department can't just do it for us. The evaluation of the impact on climate and our climate goals needs to permeate all the city's decisions to create a coordinated and effective approach to climate action. It's sad to see us fund projects that reduce greenhouse gases on one hand, and on the other hand, fund projects such as the CU South annexation that can't help but increase greenhouse gas production within the city. It's like running the furnace and air conditioner at the same time. All it does is unnecessarily increase cost of Boulder taxpayers while undoing some of the good work we are doing to reduce greenhouse gases. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Steve. And I understand actually that Jill Grano is in the meeting. She's identified as Boulder Chamber. So if we could bring her in, please.
Hi, guys. I'm so sorry about that. I need to change that Boulder Chamber. I served as the interim senior director of policy programs for the Boulder Chamber recently, and I'm on my phone in Virginia, so I can't seem to change it from here. But my name's Jill Grano. I am a former Boulder City Councilwoman, former Director of Community Affairs for Congressman Joe Neguse. I am currently one of your housing commissioners, and I'm also the proud chairwoman of the People for Voter Turnout campaign. I came to voter to politics, really to local community work through getting out the vote through New Era, Colorado. I served for 5 years as a board member, and we asked ourselves every single day the one simple question: how can we get more people voting? Is it through more ballot drop boxes? Is it through easier registration? And, is it through trick-or-treating, and instead of asking for candy, telling people to vote? Getting out the vote, engaging more people in our democracy, I believe, is the number one thing that we can do to better our elected officials that we have, and the people's engagement in policy work. Some have said that they think that this will take away from, that local issues are unique, and that somehow moving them to even years will take away from the local conversation. But as a city councilwoman and as the front line for Congressman Neguse, I really saw that people don't silo issues from what's a local issue, what's a state, what's a federal. They think about issues in terms of what affects them. So whether it was Joe Neguse or myself as a city councilwoman, the questions they would ask is, how are you going to, change homelessness? How are we going to be safer? What are you going to do about transportation? What's housing going to look like? How are we going to protect reproductive rights? And so all the time, Congressman Neguse would have joint meetings with local officials, state officials, and himself, because we knew that questions would come in that would be local, state, and federal, and we could bounce them off. You know what, Aaron, Mayor Brockett, take that one. Steve Fenberg, take that one.
Jill, I hate to interrupt, but your time is up.
Oh, sorry. Okay,
Thank
awesome.
you so much for your testimony. And
Thank
feel
you
free
so
to
much.
email any remaining comments to us. And
Absolutely.
Mayor Brockett has stepped away for a minute, so I'm going to slide in here. I believe our next speaker is Lisa Sweeney-Mirren, and on deck will be Theodore Koenig.
Hi all, Lisa Sweeney-Moran, Vice President of the Boulder Valley School Board. I'm speaking today in an individual capacity about my strong support for moving to even year elections at the city level and potentially at the school district level as well in the near future. I'm hopeful that Boulder will implement this change and increase voter participation. In so doing, Boulder's role as a leader in the state will pave the way for other municipalities to follow and for school districts to advocate at the state level for the autonomy to do the same. The status quo isn't working. At both the city level and the district level, we know that we are not getting the participation in our elections that we need, nor are we getting participation that is representative of our community. We want city councils and school boards that are made up of passionate, committed people who meaningfully represent their community. The more participation that we have, the stronger our candidates and our mandates will be. Even year elections will make us each work harder, dig deeper, and connect even more closely with the people we serve. People care about what is happening in our city. People care about what is happening in our schools. People want to have their voice heard. It's our job to figure out how to help them do that, how to make voting easier and more accessible. We were each elected to represent everyone in our communities, and this is an opportunity for us to do just that. I'm very excited about how this small change can have an enormous impact on the work we all do, and I appreciate the support you've shown for it so far. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Next up is Theodore Koenig, and on deck will be Kathy Joyner and Thomas Wells.
Good evening, members of council and the public. I'm Ted Koenig, and I'm calling from Beijing, China. I lived in Boulder for 9 years, and I continue to vote there.
It's easy to vote in Colorado, and I'm proud to report that our state makes voting internationally much easier than in most states. Still, I don't typically receive voter guides or the like until the election is well past. And while I get an email reminder or two, it's quite easy to miss that election day is coming. I imagine many voters in Boulder experience the same when they change address or the like. I think that might have happened to me in my first few years in Boulder as well. Having local elections in the same even years as large elections will make it much easier to remember when election day is coming, and that's often the first step to looking at the issues and deciding how to vote. I've heard a counterpoint that state and federal elections would deprive local issues of attention and coverage, but I have trouble imagining how much information I need as a voter that I couldn't still get. I can still track down information in a voter guide and find an article or two in the Camera, the Weekly, or the Beat. I can't imagine that they wouldn't run at least a few articles and editorials on local issues. How much more do we as voters really need to make a decision? I was pretty engaged in local issues when I lived in Colorado, and I'm honestly not sure whether it made me a better voter rather than just more plugged in. My distance here gives me some perspective that more information isn't always better. What's needed is the right information to make a choice. I hope my comment was helpful in this regard.
Thanks so much, Ted, especially for being up what had to be very early or very late. Next up, Kathy Joyner, then Thomas Wells and Kristen Eller.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Kathy Joyner, and I'm a member of the South Boulder Creek Action Group, which has been advocating for flood mitigation for almost 9 years since the 2013 floods. I'm speaking to the referendum related to CU South tonight. When the floodwaters overtopped US 36, creating a flash flood situation in 2013, none of us could have imagined what was about to happen to our homes or our lives. Speaking as only one of many residents affected, I had 9 feet of water in my house on Qualla Drive. To this day, almost 9 years later, many of my neighbors have not felt confident enough to restore their properties to pre-flood condition. But an even more significant consideration is the risk to human life when one of these events occurs. And as we know, this type of significant flooding of South Boulder Creek has occurred repeatedly in the past and will again. Evacuation and access to the area is almost impossible in one of these events, and major highways, in this case US 36 and foothills, are rendered impassable. The continuing danger this leaves residents in is known and significant. After years of hard work by the city, significant progress is being made in mitigating the potential for devastating future impacts to residents' safety and property. I've spoken before Council numerous times over the past 9 years and want to thank you, the city boards and staff, for the outstanding job they have done in expertly moving this critical project along. Lastly, as you know, there are thousands of people currently living at considerable risk of South Boulder Creek flooding, and your ongoing support has been greatly appreciated by all of us. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. Next up, Thomas Wells, then Kristen Eller and Kurt Nordback.
Greetings, everyone. This is Thomas Wells. First, I want to say thank you to staff and council members for taking time to work on the issue of even year elections. I support putting this issue before the voters this fall. As many studies and local data have shown, even year elections greatly increase voter turnout. There are many reasons to be excited about greater voter turnout, but one that is compelling to me is that it reduces the power and influence of small groups. When fewer people vote, it's easier for a small group to influence the majority of voters. When more people vote, we take away power from those small groups and return it to the greater populace. As we've seen recently on the national stage, relinquishing power is often uncomfortable, but it is a requirement for effective democracy. Shifting power from the hands of those who currently have it to those who don't won't be easy, but to quote The Mandalorian, this is the way. Almost by definition, the people you will hear from tonight are those who align with some local politically interested group or another, myself included. Increasing voter turnout will make our jobs more difficult. We will have to convince more people of the merits of our cause. We'll have to engage with more voters and spend more time educating them on the issues. This will be hard work, but it's worth it. In listening to our voices tonight, please consider, who do you hear fighting to retain power, and who do you hear enthusiastically offering to share it? Thank you.
All right, so I'm back. Thanks, Mayor Pro Tem Friend, for taking over there.
You're welcome. And just one heads up, it looks like maybe Kurt Nordback is not present, and we're wondering if Kristen Nordback is, and if they're using the same Zoom accounts. Maybe we could have them clarify that.
Great. If you all could respond in the chat if you're here. And I believe is Kristen Eller our next speaker.
Hi, yes, thank you so much. So my name is Kristen Eller, and I'm here to support moving city council elections to even years because I support voter representation. I support democracy and ensuring that our elected officials represent the people that they govern. So there's a significant reduction in the number of active voters in odd year elections in comparison to even year elections. This is known, it's shown, and it's really no surprise because even year elections have national media coverage, they have national politics, and they also have really expensive get out the vote campaigns that we just can't counter on the local level. And these get out the vote campaigns really assist voters. So odd years just don't have this, which directly impacts voter turnout. So to ensure we're electing council members that represent the people of Boulder, that means we have to increase voter turnout. Therefore, easy answer, I support democracy, and I hope as elected officials that represent the people of Boulder, you would also support democracy. And for any that don't, I just question who you're representing and why you don't want to be elected by more Boulder voters, which is why I support moving to even year elections. Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen. Okay, we're not seeing Kurt in the list, but we do see Krista. So Krista, can you go next, please?
Hi, this is Krista Nordbeck. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. First, thank you all for your tireless work on council. I believe in democracy, as I know you do too. And in that spirit, I'm really strongly in favor of the ballot issue to move municipal elections to even years. This will encourage more participation and strengthen our democracy. The more people vote in local elections, the more they feel part of our community and the better they are represented. As we learned with mail-in ballots here in Colorado, the easier we make it to participate in elections, the more people will vote. This results in policies more reflective of and responsive to the people. Please put moving municipal elections to even years on the ballot for November. Thank you. And Kurt is here. Are you seeing him yet? I think he's logging in.
Not yet. We'll come back to him as soon as he pops up.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Krista. Next, we have Sherry Hack, Evan Ravitz, and Linda Quigley.
Hi, I'm a 22-year Boulder resident. I do not support even year changing our city council elections to even year cycle. You know what this looks like? It looks like a sneaky move for some of you to extend your terms. And if you were really serious about this, why not do it in 2020 instead of 2024? What a fantasy that would be to be able to vote some of you out this year. And what about members who don't want to serve an extra year? What's the cost to taxpayers for special elections to fill the unused terms? We don't want to orphan school board elections. We want to be able to focus adequately on our local elections and not be distracted by midterm and presidential elections. A lot of people don't have the bandwidth for that. No one is disenfranchised from voting here. Everyone gets a mail-in ballot. To say it's undemocratic to have odd year elections is just ridiculous. Local issues will be drowned out by national issues if we switch. Also, I believe we're going to need more signatures on petitions. The citizens of Boulder need to be able to focus on local issues and keep the election cycle as it is. And more informed voters need time to focus on local issues versus national issues. And we want more informed voters, not just more voters. In addition, I support putting on the ballot to repeal CU South. And also regarding your climate tax, I don't support a climate tax while you support building 750,000 square feet in wetlands for CU South, and you do nothing about cleaning up the trash and the plastic and the human excrement in the Boulder Creek. Thank you.
Sherry. All right, Evan Ravitz is withdrawn. So we've got Linda Quigley, and then we'll come back to Kurt Nordback.
Hey, City Council. This is Linda Quigley. And again, I want to thank all of you for your service to Boulder. Today, honestly, I have to agree with the previous speaker and ask you to stop with the idea of switching the elections. Really. With the current polarization, there could not be a worse time to lose the details and significance of our local issues. And why on earth would we ever want to do so? Since Colorado mails ballots out to absolutely everyone who registers, and everyone can mail or drop them back to city clerk's office, why do this? There aren't votes that are being suppressed. I understand that the person in charge of our elections is counseling our council not to proceed with this idea. I'm having trouble imagining why you would want to do that when the benefits are so clear. 98% of the other cities in our country are having local elections on these even numbered years. So how is it that we're suppressing anyone? And I'm trying not to get frustrated here. I don't think the residents of Boulder want this election switch. Finally, I will work hard to encourage residents to vote yes, to set aside the annexation plan agreed to on a sham emergency basis by council. I've never had more reason to not believe in my city government. Building in a wetlands is heresy during catastrophic climate change and a 6th grade extinction event, especially by a university that fires the climate scientist who's measuring the pollutants in our Front Range atmosphere. I thank you for your time in the staff of Boulder City. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. And I believe we have Kurt Nordback in the meeting now, if we can go to him. And then after Kurt will be Judd Valesky and Jennifer, Judd Valesky, anyway.
Thank you. I apologize for being late. You guys are even more efficient than I expected. A big part of America's story has been the halting but long-term trend towards expansion of the electorate. It hasn't been a smooth journey, but as voters have become a larger and larger portion of the population, our democracy has become stronger, fairer, more resilient, more just. At the beginning of our country, voting was generally limited to white male property owners. Then, perhaps surprisingly, President Andrew Jackson worked to expand suffrage for non-property owners. In 1870, the 15th Amendment nominally gave Black men the vote, but in practice, Jim Crow took this right away from them for close to a century. The Snyder Act of 1924 gave all Native Americans citizenship and therefore the right to vote, but state-level restrictions continued to limit Indigenous people's suffrage for decades. Women finally won the vote with the 19th Amendment, almost 80 years after Lucretia Mott and Elizabeth Cady Stanton started the women's suffrage movement in this country. We got the Voting Rights Act in 1965 and the 26th Amendment lowering the voting age to 18 in 1971. Today, most adult citizens have the legal right to vote, with notable exceptions, including those in prison and convicted felons. Unfortunately, we've seen renewed efforts at voter suppression around the country. The struggle continues. But what's clear is that democracy is stronger when more people vote. Voting engages citizens and increases our investment in government and our democracy. It gives us a voice. It makes politicians pay attention. It brings pride. It shows that we matter. That's why I urge you to put the voter turnout measure on the ballot. Do your part to help make our union more perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. Next, we have Judd Valesky, and then Jennifer Cashnow is withdrawn. So then we have Rebecca Davies and Lisa Spalding.
Hi there, Judd here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thanks. Thanks for the time. I'm here to speak about against the idea of moving to even year elections. Don't have my thoughts terribly formed here, but I'd love to just take Sherry Hack's comments previously. She put it in words much better than I can here. But to try to pull a couple of salient points out of there, it's pretty unclear to me how the existing citizenry here is having its votes suppressed when we fully support mail-in ballot dynamics. So there's a functional issue there that I see with a lot of the arguments being made. But perhaps more importantly to me personally is alignment with even years throws us into the manipulated chaos of national elections. You know, I am very fearful of showing up on an even year and dealing with presidential and broader congressional issues and legislation that has had the full force of billions and billions of dollars behind special interest groups driving agendas. I've always felt that the odd year election cycle that we've been in here in Boulder has shielded us from a lot of that chaos, and increasingly over the past handful of elections. So the idea that we're suddenly caught up in that would just be terribly sad to me. Anyway, that's all I had to say against the move to even year elections. Thanks for the time. Take care.
Thanks, Judd. Rebecca Davies, Lisa Spalding, and Leslie Barrett.
Hello. Thanks so much for the time. I'm Rebecca Davies, and I'm 35 and a very consistent voter, but I've actually never been to a polling booth. I grew up in Oregon, and by the time I turned 18, Oregon already had vote by mail for all elections, as it was the first state to do so. So I haven't experienced the polling booth voting, and I often take it for granted that I can continue to vote by mail in Colorado, but I really shouldn't, because many people in the US don't have access to that form of expanded democracy. I'm grateful to the people who worked hard to put vote by mail in place in both states, with the recognition that it would help people like me participate in elections consistently, much more consistently than I frankly would have otherwise. I see even year elections as similarly a clear step towards further facilitating voter participation, which has been demonstrated by multiple examples around the country and the data from elections within our own city. Participation is much higher in even year elections, the electorate is more diverse, and voters really, really like it, which is why they've passed measures to implement even year elections in large numbers elsewhere. Boulder has many ambitious goals also around diversity and equity, and supporting even year elections is a way to take meaningful action towards those goals. I'm eager for Boulder to build upon the good work done by others to increase voter participation in our elections, and I'm grateful that City Council is considering this measure for the November ballot. I'm confident that the Boulder electorate will support moving to even year elections if given the chance. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Now we have Lisa Spalding, Leslie Barrett, and Andy Saylor.
Lisa Spalding. I urge you not to place even year voting on the ballot this November. You would be far better off increasing outreach to those groups that do not commonly vote in our municipal elections than spending a large sum of money on the elaborate revisions needed to enact this change in our voting schedule if it passes. People vote because they have an interest in something. In the case of elections for city council members, people vote because they care about the future of our city. Some people who are here temporarily for study or jobs may not vote in odd years because they know they will be moving on. The large number of older people who vote regularly that Brian Keegan refers to in his recent Daily Camera guest opinion proves that people who live in Boulder long-term vote and continue to vote because they care about the future of our city. I would, however, question Mr. Keegan's assertion that many of these regular voters are not just old, but wealthy too. Any analysis of property values in areas where students live will show rental houses that are valued at less than the houses kept up by permanent residents, be they renters or owners. Mr. Keegan's analysis would benefit from a further question. Do even year voters vote only for presidents and congresspeople or all the way down the ballot? A well-planned outreach program for odd year elections would benefit Boulder by involving more people in both municipal and school board matters on a level that far exceeds possible cursory votes for city council members in even years. Please take a long-range view of this issue and embark on a constructive plan to increase inclusivity in a meaningful way, rather than supporting a reactive approach with unforeseen consequences. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Next, we have Leslie Barrett actually is not in the meeting. We'll keep on if they come back. We have Andy Saylor, RJ Boyle, and Rosemary Hegarty.
Good evening. My name is Andy Saylor, and I'm a resident of North Boulder. I'm speaking this evening in favor of allowing our community to vote on moving council elections to even years. We stand at a significant moment in our nation's history. Our democracy is under assault at every level, and its survival is far from guaranteed. At the federal level, we have current and former leaders who are actively working to delegitimize our elections. In many states, we are facing laws aimed to limit and discourage who can vote. And at the local level, we must contend with election schedules that significantly suppress voter turnout. In all these cases, the aim is the same: to win power by controlling who votes rather than by having the most popular ideas. As Mr. Norbeck mentioned, these issues are not new. Our nation's founders were big fans of this idea of voter equality. After all, they wrote a constitution where only white men could vote and decided that a significant portion of our population only counted as 3/5 of a person. We have spent the past 235 years working to correct these flaws, even as the Republican Party seeks to expand and exploit them. If we wish to keep our democracy, if we wish to uphold the principle that our society is strongest when all constituents have a voice, we must fight to preserve these principles. In Boulder, we have an opportunity to do our part. Moving local elections to even years brings many more voices into the conversation. It makes voting easier for everyone. It ensures that all members of our community are represented, and not just the right ones. It will ensure we select council candidates on the basis of the popularity of their ideas, rather than on the basis of who turns out to vote. Our work to correct our flawed democracy is far from done, and more critical than ever. Allowing the people to vote on moving to even year elections supports these efforts in our own small local way. Thank you for your time, and I encourage everyone to support improving our democracy and moving to even year local elections.
Thank you, Andy. RJ Boyle, Rosemary Hegarty, and Mike Marsh.
Good evening. My name is RJ Boyle, and I was a former co-lead of Boulders for People, which was a campaign on the 2021 election dedicated to creating a pro-people Boulder welcome to all, particularly all voices that need to participate in our democratic processes. For the very same reasons I supported Boulders for People, I'm here to support even year elections for the city of Boulder. Data shows that from 2018 to 2021, turnout in even years is in the 75% to 85% range, contrasting with odd year elections where turnout is only in the 48 to 50% range. More than twice as many voters turn out in even year elections because of the critical votes Boulderites are casting at that time. We understand more and more that participating in local politics can be more important than doing so at the national level, however. Local elections should be taking place in even years alongside these national elections to encourage turnout in greater numbers and in a way that more accurately includes and represents all people that make up this city. For those who assume that those who are not, quote, staying here long enough, think that the people who are choosing to show up in half as many numbers in odd year elections are leaving out the idea that people are voting simply out of convenience. If someone's voting for the president on the way out, they might pick their next mayor or their next school board director, although that's not a part of this, or their next city council representative. With odd year elections, Boulder's most underrepresented electorates suffer the greatest. It's been demonstrated that people like renters, people of color, lower income people, and young people are consistently underrepresented, not because they don't live here long, but because they don't have the chance to be here when their voices need to be heard. Moving to even year elections can close turnout discrepancies for everyone, but critically for places where Boulder has the greatest diversity. By moving to even year elections, we protect democracy and improve the reliability of our city's policymaking because we open civic engagement to the widest swath of people and welcome every voice possible in the conversation. Please support this important measure and thanks. Wow.
Thanks, RJ. Rosemary Hegarty, Mike Marsh, and David Glover.
Hi, my name is Rosemary Hegarty. I live in South Boulder, and I just don't get it on the moving, the pros of moving this, our elections from odd to even years. I don't really feel like, 90% or more of the people that are pro moving the election seem to think that I am somehow anti-democratic by voting in an odd year, that somehow I am suppressing voters' ability to vote, even though they have a ballot mailed to their house. I just don't get it. And I feel like I really want to keep my elections for my local issues separate from the national issues so that I can actually focus on those. And I certainly will not have time to volunteer for a local election if I am also volunteering on a national election. I just don't have time to do that. So what sort of suffering is going to happen to elections if we're dividing that up or having everything happen at the same time? I also don't understand when people are saying that there's so many positive aspects when it's changed, when 98% of the cities in the United States have odd year local elections. So where is the statistics proving this unbelievable benefit to changing it? I'm also very opposed to the fact that some of you are going to be handed a 5-year term. I think that needs to be taken off the table. It is not fair to give yourself, and Matt, you can shake your head all you want. I'm totally opposed to it. I'm also opposed to this. I'm really happy to get a chance to vote against your CU South decision. Thank you.
Thanks, Rosemary. And I'll just say that if people have questions for the speaker, that's fine, but I think we might save responses until the end. Okay, thanks. All right, moving on, we have Mike Marsh, David Glover, and Paul Coleman.
I'm Mike Marsh, speaking in support of keeping our local elections on odd-numbered years. I strongly support higher voter turnout, but our goal should be increasing voter turnout in odd years. Every registered Boulder voter receives a ballot in odd-numbered years. These mail-in ballots don't require time off work to vote. Every Boulder voter is fully enfranchised to vote in odd-numbered years. Nearly all US cities hold their municipal elections in odd-numbered years, and I read that no Colorado city of significant size does local elections in even years. Why? Peer cities realize local elections are important enough that they deserve their own day in the sun when voters have the bandwidth and time to really focus on local issues and candidates and give them the attention they deserve without the competition from national and state races. But some propose we put local races at the tail end, page 10 or 11, of incredibly long ballots in even years. Ballot fatigue is a real thing. Voters are repelled by ballots that go on forever, and many will skip the down ballot section. National and state races are typically simple and binary, Democrat versus Republican. You select one, typically by your party. In contrast, city council elections require voters to select 5 candidates from a crowded pool of up to 16. They don't run as Republicans or Democrats. Instead, voters must study each candidate's nuanced positions on dozens of important local issues. Ditto for complex local ballot measures. The devil's in the details in local elections, and odd-numbered years allow voters and local media unfettered space to drill into those details with the sufficient editorial and community bandwidth for robust, thorough local conversations. I believe this will be lost if local elections are combined with national and state. I urge you to regard local elections as important enough to have their own time in their own election year. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Next, we have David Glover, Paul Coleman, and Lori Call.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, City Council. My name is David Glover. Thank you for your time. I am speaking in support of moving to even year elections. Many of the opponents of even year elections are speaking as if we are deciding this right now. We are simply putting this measure on the ballot for the people of Boulder to decide. We should allow the people of Boulder to make the decision that is best for them. The opponents also like to point out that most cities do odd year elections. When has Boulder ever wanted to be like most cities? We want to be exceptional. We want to be trailblazers. We want to do things that work for us, and we should not use an outdated standard that other cities use to propel us forward. Other people in support of odd year elections have echoed the fact that voter turnout is higher, voter turnout is more diverse, voter turnout is more balanced. Why spend extra money to try to reach voters who don't typically vote on odd years when we can do one efficient measure to increase voter turnout in a fell swoop? Data shows states with odd year elections end up spending millions more as opposed to states that line up their elections with the typical national elections. No data shows that odd year voters are more informed. In fact, data shows odd year elections favor special interest groups. And for me, I want Boulder to be run and decided by the people of Boulder, not special exclusionary interest groups. Local elections have a major impact. They empower people to speak on the issues that matter to them most and affect them the most. And I believe that by moving to even year elections, we will have a huge impact. Thank you for your time. And again, put this on the ballot so the people of Boulder can choose for themselves.
Thank you, David. Now we have Paul Coleman, Lori Call, and Jennifer Banyan.
Good evening, council and staff. My name is Paul Coleman. I live in South Boulder. We talk about Ordinance 8542, the Climate Action Plan Tax. Want to slip in a congratulations to Jonathan Cohen on being appointed to Director of Climate Initiatives. And just as council needs support from us, the people, council, your staff needs support from council. And I really want you to think about, in terms of climate change, don't just put this on autopilot. You need to tell your climate initiatives director and staff, and Nuria also, our city manager, that you really care about climate change and you really want this work done. We need to look at proportionality of the problem. It seems like the amount of the tax was pretty arbitrarily decided on, and I'm worried that we're not going to reach our climate goals based on this level of financing. So it's something you as council really need to keep an eye on, that we are making the progress we need to make towards our climate goals. And I'm listening to all this talk about the election cycle. There seems to be something missed here, is that the odd year elections are not going away. We're still, every registered Boulder County voter is going to get a ballot every year. The election's not going away. We may move races from one election to another, but we still need to turn out in the odd year elections. And I hope these people who are so passionate about even year elections will put some of that passion into turnout in the odd years. I personally don't see any point in moving the election or the races to the even years, but I'll vote either way. I think probably it'll be more name recognition if we move it to even years.
Paul, I'm afraid your time is up, but I really appreciate your testimony.
Thank you all.
Thanks. Next we have Lori Call, Jennifer Banyan, and Christian Kerr.
Hi, I'm Lori Call, Assistant Vice Chancellor for Local Government and Community Engagement at the University of Colorado Boulder. I want to address the CU Boulder South referendum this evening. The university purchased this property in 1996 from a mining company based on future needs. Since then, engineering studies identified this area as the best place for a flood mitigation system to protect 2,300 downstream residents. In 2021, after many years of thoughtful collaboration and a thorough engagement process, Boulder City Council voted to annex CU Boulder South into the city limits. We now have important flood protection efforts underway that will safeguard thousands of people and 1,100 homes. The annexation also allows us to address another pressing community challenge, the availability of housing. It will enable a portion of the land that lies outside the floodplain to become attainable housing for CU faculty, staff, and students. We want those who work and study in Boulder to be able to live here. It also dedicates 5 acres of land to the community for affordable housing open to those who qualify based on income level. Finally, it's important for people to know that 119 acres, nearly 40% of the property, will be designated permanently protected City of Boulder open space with public access. This legally binding agreement represents a strong partnership between the university and the city that provides significant benefits and protections for our community. Overturning the annexation of CU Boulder South would compromise the critical progress currently underway. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Now we have Jennifer, except I think that Jennifer Banyan is not here. So not Jennifer, Christian Kerr, Max Hollingsworth, and Kristen Hess.
Christian, you're unmuted. You just need to open your mic.
Christian, we're not hearing you.
Christian, it looks like you're unmuted, but we are unable to hear you.
All right. Why don't we move on? We'll come back to Christian a little bit. So that gives us Max Hollingsworth.
Max, your mic is open and it looks like you are unmuted. Please feel free to begin speaking.
Max, we're not hearing you. We seem to be cursed all of a sudden. All right, let's see. Let's move on again. Let's try Kristen Hess next, and then Rosie Vivian. We'll come back to these folks.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Hello, thank you for giving me the chance to speak tonight. My name is Kristen Hess, and I've been a Boulder resident for 8 years. I support the even year elections. I've found that Boulder works to make mail-in voting as easy as possible, and I really appreciate the opportunity to fill out my ballot at home on my own time. From talking with my friends, we've all benefited from mail-in ballots. One reason I prefer mail-in ballots is that I can take the time to learn about the measures and candidates I'm voting on. I may be drawn into voting by issues that make national news headlines, but filling out my ballot has given me the chance to learn about, vote, and become more engaged in local politics. I have a hard time blindly filling in the bubbles on my ballot, and I know I'm not alone. So I turn to the internet and Google candidates and measures and find out more about them before filling out and dropping off or mailing in my ballot. Since many of my friends have done the same, we then find ourselves talking about what we've learned as we filled out our ballots or asked questions to finish filling out our ballots. I think this unplanned process has made me more connected to Boulder. Over the years, I've become a more active voter, but I will admit that I have a few gaps in my voting record, mostly during odd year elections. I've been motivated to vote when I hear about national issues, but then I have had an opportunity to learn more about key issues impacting my community when I research and vote on local candidates and measures. I'm really excited about this even year election measure to keep me and other voters like me more engaged and informed about the community we live in. We have this opportunity to make it a little easier for Boulder residents to learn about and vote on local politics. I think this measure is a step in the right direction, and I'm excited to support it. Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen. Now we have Rosie Vivian, Celeste Landry, and Lisa Harris.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. My name is Rosie Vivian. I live in Table Mesa and I support moving city council election to even years. Voter participation is a passion of mine. In my first election when I was 18 years old, I registered and voted against Ronald Reagan. I was passionate and informed about voting and even chose to vote differently than my parents did. And believe me, I felt like my vote mattered. I hope people will reflect on their first time voting and how it shaped them. Fast forward to the 2016 election, and I spent a lot of time volunteering at voter registration events and became an election judge in Boulder County in 2018 and in the primary this year. My interest in voter participation has also led me to run this year as PCP in Precinct 855 Table Mesa. These experiences over my lifetime have led me to believe that every vote matters, every voice should be heard. I'm flabbergasted that I have to say this in light of recent propaganda floating around. But lest we forget, and for those community members that could not be here tonight, a vote is a vote. One person's vote is as valuable as another person's vote. A renter's vote is equal to a homeowner's vote. A vote from someone who moved here yesterday is equal to a vote from someone born here. A young person's vote is equal to a senior citizen's vote. It's much more difficult to vote here in odd years, especially if you just arrived or rent or move from time to time, or if it's your first time voting. There are fewer open polling centers and hours of operation in even years, and the people I assisted in the polling centers, their votes matter. Very few election judges are even needed in odd years, and just coming off working as an adjudication judge in the primary, we had a much lower turnout than expected. The voter turnout data makes it clear more people vote in even years. Let's hear the voices of our whole community. This should be an easy victory in Boulder. I also strongly support a no vote on the ballot measure regarding CU South and remember speaking in favor of the annexation previously. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosie. Now we have Celeste Landry, Lisa Harris, and Emily Reynolds.
So can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I'm here to talk about Ordinance 8540 on the new mayoral election. I would like to ask about the thinking behind not allowing someone to be a candidate for both mayor and council simultaneously. I recall hearing from staff at a council meeting that dual candidacy doesn't really work with the city's campaign finance rules. Maybe it was matching funds, but we are a home rule city, so we can take care of that problem. Democracy is better when voters have more candidates and a better voting method, so we don't end up splitting the vote. Boulder will have a better voting method, instant runoff ranked voting, but we may not have more candidates because we will prohibit people from running for both offices simultaneously. Boulder would be going backwards. Up to now, people have been able to run for council and then immediately upon winning, run for mayor. If changes to the city's campaign finance rules are in code rather than in city charter, council could change Ordinance 8540 on its second page, line 4, to read, a person may be a candidate for both mayor and council member at any regular municipal election. I also have a second point I'd like to make. I'm fine with continuing council members running for mayor, winning, and the city suddenly electing, in addition to the regular 4 council members, a 5th council candidate to fill the new mayor's unexpired 2 years left on their council term. What I'm not so excited about is that we'd elect 5 council members, but voters would only get to weigh in on their ballot by marking 4. Last night, I sent an email to council members Benjamin and Spear detailing 3 better alternatives. So I hope you'll consider those as you adopt Ordinance 8540. And I want to say thank you to Councilmember Friend for bringing up the issue on what to do if nobody runs for mayor. Thanks.
Thanks, Celeste. We have Lisa Harris and Emily Reynolds, and then we're going to come back to Christian Kerr and Max Hollingsworth.
Hi, it's Lisa Harris. I'm speaking in favor of keeping local elections in odd years because I think it's really important that Boulder decides our local elections, not big money, not big parties. I say this as a precinct leader since 2009, and I care very, very deeply about voter turnout. Every year, even in odd, I deliver voter guides to every door of a registered Democrat, independent, and unaffiliated. No, there's not a party represented there, but I have gotten it done with volunteers and without. In some years, it was completely up to me to make these deliveries and to get these calls out. I've also worked on municipal ballot measures and council campaigns. In Colorado, every voter has a ballot mailed to their door every year. Voting here is truly a right that can be easily exercised. And as someone who feels very competitive about my voter turnout numbers every year, I strive for high turnout every year. The answer is not to move council elections to even years. The effectiveness of odd year council elections that we have had in place for so long, and like so many other municipalities, is going to be hard to replace. Here's why. No major political parties are involved to muddy the waters, my own party included, because Boulder is one of the few cities who has put in place campaign finance reform. City council candidates have to stand on an unprecedented even field in odd years. The second you move those elections to an even year, it becomes just another down ballot race with lots of dollars spent, and the equality disappears. In an odd year, we have forums, interviews, journalists to hold our council candidates accountable. I love that. If I'm given a choice between working on a council campaign or a Senate campaign or a presidential campaign or watching a debate for Senate or president, what am I going to do? We can have 10 to 20 candidates run for council, and that's super cool. Will voters take the time to hear from each of them? In an even year. Thank you. Let's be more thoughtful about this.
Thanks, Lisa. We have Emily Reynolds, then Christian Kerr and Max Hollingsworth.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. I wanted to speak this evening about elections in even years, Ordinance 8546. I'm opposed to changing Boulder's tradition of odd year city council elections, a system that continues to be used by the vast majority of cities nationwide and throughout Colorado. Moving local elections to even years when local issues and candidates can be relegated to a distant third place behind state and national races risks local issues getting lost in the shuffle. The advantages of local elections in odd years, when there's no competition for the community's political discussion, media focus, campaign volunteers, means we can have more in-depth community conversations on local issues and more informed local decisions. I'm also opposed to reducing the terms of the council members elected in 2023 and 2025 to 3 years, a heavy-handed approach that is unfair to candidates in our next 2 local elections. When something isn't broken, there's no need to fix it. Relegating local issues and candidates to the end of a long ballot is not going to increase voter participation. If anything, more people may neglect local elections because of ballot fatigue. I ask you to allow Boulder voters to continue to be able to make informed decisions on local elections by maintaining Boulder's tradition of odd year city council elections, where we can give local politics the attention it deserves. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. We have Christian Kerr, Max Hollingsworth, and I understand Juan Marcano is not present, so we'll move to Chris Nicholson.
Can you hear me this time?
Yes, we can.
Great, thanks. I am also speaking about the item of moving voting to even years as opposed to odd. To me, it seems an odd choice, as the issues that we face locally really often have very little overlap with national issues. National issues take up a lot of oxygen and are often very heated and partisan. Local issues are often more nuanced, granular, and really deserve their own time and space within voters' minds. the whole idea of voter suppression or racism behind voting in even or odd years really rings false to me, because everybody has ballots mailed to them every year. So the voting is there, it's accessible, it's available to all. What this issue really comes down to for me is giving every issue and vote its due consideration. It's important. It's an important role that we have, and I feel like giving time to local issues is vital to the success of this community. That's all I got. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Christian. All right, now we're going to give Max Hollingsworth another try, and then Chris Nicholson and Sean Rupp.
Hi. Hi, can you hear me this time?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. That's great. Okay. Hi, my name is Max Hollingsworth. I live in Boulder, and I support moving to even year city elections. The first thing I want to say is that this is really exciting for me and for all Democrats. We live in a country where every day Republicans are trying to make it harder to vote. But here in Boulder, we have the opportunity to do just the opposite. We get to expand democracy here, increase participation, and make it a little bit easier for more people in our Boulder community to participate. And that's pretty cool. And we're not the first city to move to even year elections. We're joining a long list of cities like Pasadena, College Station, Ann Arbor. And when people voted on it there, it always won by a lot. Turns out this is a really popular idea. So I'm excited that in a time when Republicans are doing away with things that are supported by an overwhelming majority, like access to abortion, like ease of voting, we get a chance to show that democracy still works here in Boulder and that popular ideas can prevail. All right, another reason I came to speak is that I'd like to share my experience of volunteering around last year's odd year election. I did get out the vote, door knocking, and on-campus events, and here's what I saw. Lots of young people in their 20s and 30s, both students and non-students, didn't have up-to-date home addresses. Why? Because from year to year, we change neighborhoods. Leases end, jobs change, we have different roommates. It's just a reality for some. You know, look, I love mail-in ballots. I wouldn't give those up for anything. But if you're moving around yearly, it takes a lot of extra foresight to make sure that your ballot ends up at the right place at the right time. And in even years, we have the institutions, the registration drives, the outreach to take care of that problem. So I'm excited that we're going to move to even years. We're facilitating a healthy democracy, and I think that's great. Thanks.
Thanks. Chris Nicholson, Sean Rupp, and Chelsea Castellano.
I want to read you something that I came across a couple days ago. Quote, "While I don't recommend including this in your talking points, the fact is, while even-numbered election years will pull in thousands more voters, many such voters don't pay attention to local issues because they're short-term residents. Whether it's beneficial for such voters to decide long-term issues and tax increases that long-term residents will have to live with for decades is an open question. We know from voter turnout data that even-numbered election years see an 80% increase in student voters in some precincts. So we'll have a decidedly more pro-CU electorate in even years, with major implications for current issues with CU. Remember, less than 1,000 votes typically determine the winners in city council races. But again, these arguments won't play well at the public hearing. You'll be labeled anti-student, anti-democracy, anti-voting, etc. So I recommend limiting comments to the advantages of local elections in odd years when there's no competition for the community's political bandwidth. That is what one of the opponents of even year elections emailed out to their group, letting others know what they believe but did not want said at this hearing. That they oppose this measure because they don't like who would be voting. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Now we have Sean Rupp, Chelsea Castellano, and Judy Amabile.
Hi, my name is Sean Rupp, and I'm a resident of North Boulder. I'm speaking tonight in support of moving city council elections to even years. I moved to Boulder in the summer of 2015, and I say that not because it matters how long I've been here, but just to point out that it was right before an odd year election. I remember voting in that local election that year, but I'll be honest, I don't think I really knew much about the candidates or about the issues. I did try to learn, though. I remember reading candidate profiles, daily camera articles, ballot explainers, but it was really hard to differentiate between candidates based on some vague platitudes on campaign websites. I didn't really feel like there was an easy way to learn about the local issues, and I don't remember a ton of engagement from either candidates or my fellow voters. It's been shown in other cities that moving local elections to even years leads to greater voter turnout for those elections. This greater turnout means that candidates would need to engage the community a lot more to advocate for their ideas. Personally, I think that's a huge benefit. It would have the effect of engaging more people in local politics and increasing awareness of local issues. If you're a candidate for city council and you truly believe that your ideas are beneficial for the city and all of its residents, then you should love the idea of more people voting. You get to engage more voters and advocate for your ideas. You have the opportunity to convince voters that your ideas will make our community stronger. That seems like a huge win to me. I believe that moving municipal elections to even years would be a great way to let more voices be heard in local issues. I strongly support this measure, and I hope that you will too. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Sean. Now we have Chelsea Castellano, Judy Mobley, and our last speaker will be Laura Tyler.
Hello, my name is Chelsea Castellano, and I'm here tonight to both thank and support the council majority that will vote to protect and strengthen our democracy. As one of the most highly educated communities in the country, our first inclination when trying to understand an issue is to look at the research. And the research here could not be more clear. Off-year elections cause low voter turnout, and shifting the timing of elections to align with state and federal elections is the singular most effective election reform that can significantly increase participation in our democracy. Zoltan Hodgnall, a respected scholar on US politics and policy, has stated that, quote, every published study on election timing and voter turnout shows that combining local elections with state and federal elections is the single most important change that local governments can undertake to increase turnout. Most studies show that turnout doubles compared to off-cycle elections, end quote. Other cities and states have listened and learned. Ann Arbor, Pasadena, College Station, Texas are among the many cities that have recently passed moving their elections to even years. These measures have passed with up to 83% support. These measures win because they are popular. These measures win because expanding access to voting has always been and will always be the right thing to do. Equipped with all the knowledge that this change will make our democracy stronger, it is now both our responsibility and opportunity to take what we know and act. This fall, Boulder has the chance to be a leader, a beacon of light in what has been a dark and disturbing chapter for democracy across our nation. I believe that our democracy is strongest when we welcome people in, not when we shut people out. And I am proud to live in a place that will pass this significant of an election reform in November. Thank you.
Thank you, Chelsea. Now we have our state representative, Judy Mobley, and then Laura Tyler.
Hi, my name is Judy Amabile, and I'm the state rep for Colorado House District 13, but I'm here today as a City of Boulder resident. We all like to say how long we have lived in Boulder when we come to these things. So for the record, I've been here for 47 years. But I don't think those 47 years mean that my vote has more value or more legitimacy. And I don't think that it guarantees that I'm a more thoughtful or more high quality voter. And so I want us to put that aside for a minute. We have heard a lot of reasons tonight to vote no on this change. And I know that change is hard, it's scary, but in my 47 years here in Boulder, a lot of things have changed, and we can't stop change from happening because we have to change to meet the moment. It's clear we need to take the next step to enfranchise more people, to get more people engaged, to get more people voting in our elections. It will get more newer residents, younger people, people with less resources to vote. And it will cause us to change what we work on, what policies we advance, and how we work on those policies. And that, I think, is going to be a good thing. So I encourage you to vote yes for this change. And let's get more people voting, and let's get more people who haven't been voting to engage in our city politics. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Judy. All right, our last speaker is Laura Tyler.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for this opportunity to speak. My name is Laura Tyler, and for many years I served as co-director of South Boulder Creek Action Group. It was a year ago right now that I felt the weight of the world was on my shoulders because I was organizing testimony for your annexation hearing. My heart is so filled with gratitude and relief that you supported annexation as a council. And I want to extend my thanks to so many of you who spoke tonight. Just so many people in this community involved in moving this project across the finish line, and then city staff as well. It was just an enormous, enormous effort. And the reason why I'm here tonight is to let you know that I oppose the current CU South referendum. And the reason why I oppose it, there are two reasons. I know it needs to go on the ballot. However, we did vote on this exact same thing last year, and it was voted down by about a 14-point margin. So I want to thank the community as well. And I don't support the referendum because it would undo so much work, just years and years of efforts, compromise, conversations, meetings. It was just a very meaningful process. And that is it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura. And we have confirmed that all of the missing speakers from before are still missing. So that will bring our public hearing to a close. So do we have any responses or questions as a follow-up from the testimony we've heard tonight? Matt?
Thanks, Aaron. So I have a couple questions for staff to help sort of clarify. I heard a few misconceptions about things, and since we're in the process of trying to pass some things, and voter education is really important. So one of them I've heard from a few folks, and we got some emails quite recently about it, is with regards to Ordinance 85, I think it's 8546, with regards to even year elections. Just to be clear, maybe this is for Teresa or Kathy, are we extending anybody's terms with this new ordinance that we're looking to perhaps pass on second reading tonight?
No, you are not.
Okay. And so I just want to clarify that. The other one has to do with regards to, the individual that we get our election advice from. I presume they maybe meant our county clerk. And if I recall from when she was visiting with us, helping us navigate this question, I think didn't she have a preference that the solution we end on she would prefer is if we kept the mayoral ranked choice voting election in 2023 as it's currently written into the current ordinance. Is that correct?
I really hesitate to speak for somebody else or put words in their mouth. I don't want to put words in their mouth. I believe that was her preference, so that Boulder would have that Boulder County would have the opportunity to have the experience and help form the stuff that's happening at the state level because of last year's bill.
I appreciate the Kathy. And the last one I wanted to sort of clarify was with sort of the idea of undue expense, and to sort of clarify, I'm not sure where that sort of came from, but I thought that was with regards to whether we had moved around the ranked choice voting part. And really, it's the ranked choice voting that carries a large expense in our upcoming elections, not necessarily anything to do with even year. Is that a fair characterization of where the expenses really reside in any of our changes?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Appreciate it. Those are the questions and clarifications I had to try to make sure that, you know, everyone listening and the people out there are hearing the facts as they are. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks. And by the way, thanks folks for reserving your comments here to the end, because that was my mayoral intervention to do that, just to only ask questions during the testimony, but save comments or responses for the end. Appreciate you working with me on that. We got Nicole, Rachel, Junie, and Lauren.
Thank you. Thanks to everybody who spoke up in public comment too. Just a couple of questions around the climate tax. I think one of the commenters mentioned that it was sort of an arbitrary amount that we were putting in place for the climate tax. My understanding is that this was actually quite a thoughtful and lengthy process on staff's part to get to that amount. And I was just wondering if staff could clarify that for us. Just basically to the amount that we're going to be raising and spending.
Sure. I think Jonathan hasn't been able to join us, so I will take that again. I'm Carolyn Elam. I'm a senior manager in our climate initiatives department. So I think as we outlined in our packet, we've been collecting just shy of $4 million a year from our two previous taxes. And we thought very clearly about what would be a reasonable increase in that, as well as how we could manage the impacts from an equity perspective on those who would experience an increase in tax. And so we'd originally recommended a $1 million increase through our response to surveys, as well as further discussion. We further recommended to go to the $6.5 million level to really advance our wildfire mitigation and resiliency work. And so I think we were very thoughtful about that. I do know, and I think I heard very clearly from our community member, Mr. Cullen, you know, we are in a climate emergency, and there's often a desire to spend as much as we can to advance our work. This is really why we recommended the inclusion of bonding capacity within the ballot measure, so we can advance funding against future year taxes to really accelerate that work. So that was the thought process behind our recommended strategy of the $6.5 million level.
Great, thank you so much. And just one other question while we have you, Carolyn. This is around the measurements and sort of outcomes that some folks were referring to. And I was just wondering if you could speak to whether any of the money that will be generated by the climate tax would allow us to do more of that kind of reporting on how we're progressing and how we're doing.
Yes, definitely. And I always appreciate Ms. Glestrom's emphasis and challenge to us to really make sure we're measuring progress. And definitely all of our work is going to be aligned with two objectives. That's either mitigating our carbon emissions, where we very clearly track that through annual reporting. We do look at our various programs and what they're contributing, as well as enhancing our community resilience. And so really focusing on that, and we'll be very transparent in those numbers, and we'll definitely be continuing to measure progress and effectiveness of our dollars.
Great, thank you so much. And then, sorry, folks, just one more question. I think this one's for Kathy. This is in relation to some of the questions about the mayoral cleanup. Could you just clarify why we have this kind of clarification in place that folks can't run for two seats at the same time?
Sure, I can try. And it's not a matter of, whether we can or can't draft to make changes, because we can. But I think the important part is to keep the purposes of what both the matching funds and the campaign finance limitations were for. And you have the question of matching funds. If people are running for two different offices, do they get double the potential matching funds? Then you've got all the campaign finance restrictions, like a candidate has a maximum of $100 contributions that they can accept from various individuals. If they're running for two offices, do you split that? Do you double it? Do you split it 50-50, 75-25? How do you do that? And how do you make it so it's not an opportunity for somebody to take two bites at the apple in their campaigning when we are trying to limit the costs of campaigns by doing matching funds and having contribution limits for candidate committees. There's also the thing of that with campaign disclosures, the committees are supposed to be completely separate, but a person can't split himself or herself from the one running from mayor for the one running from council. So that's my initial list.
All right, thank you. And just one question in the discussions that I know the committee talked about this a lot. When you mentioned 2 bites of the apple, I mean, what I sort of envision, right, is if whenever you're running, you're getting your name out there a lot, right? And as we heard some folks say tonight, sometimes you're just voting by name recognition. So presumably if you were going in 2 campaigns at the same time, that could potentially give you an advantage in one or the other as well. Is that anything the committee talked to or spoke to?
We didn't talk about that directly. I'm talking about the part that would be for the city and thinking of the 2 bites of the apple. I mean, I think you're raising a very legitimate point on the side of the candidates. From the city's perspective, we're looking at how do we figure out what's $100 limit? Is it per candidate position? Is it per person? Is it whatever? And then the communications and then the matching funds.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks, Rachel, Junie, Lauren, then I'll call myself.
Okay, a couple questions. Number one, Eric Budd testified about some statistics around moving to even year elections, and that the statistics really only held true if the elections occurred in November at the same time as federal and state, versus if you had like a May election, as I understand it, those statistics don't add up. So I think what we're trying to do is increase voter turnout. So we're not looking to create an even year election at a special election in the spring, because that doesn't really arrive at the same endpoint. So do we have that covered? Is there a change that we can make? I understand that we can't change language that would somehow mean that we would be advocating in the language that we use, but is there language that needs to be added, or is his concern already addressed in the language that would ensure that what we're doing is having an even year election at the time that voter turnout is expected to be higher for the other reasons, which is state and federal elections, even if we can't use those words?
And yes, it is covered, and I just grabbed the wrong one. No, I didn't. Yes, here it is. That in Ordinance 8546, the amendment to Section 22 that's on page 24 of your packet, it says we're moving the regular municipal election from the first or Tuesday in November when there's state ballot issues to the Tuesday in, I'm sorry, we are changing it from the Tuesday in November that there are state ballot issues in odd years to the Tuesday in November where there are state elections in even years. So it's got the November in there, and it's got that, you know, one's not on the first Tuesday of the month and the other one on the first Tuesday following a Monday on a month. They are the same Tuesday as the state elections.
Okay.
In November.
Thank you. Second question, there was an early speaker who talked about some assumptions made at CU South. I don't know if Joe Taducci might be on the call. That Nuri is giving me a look like maybe not.
I am looking, but maybe not.
Or anyone else. You know, an assertion is made that we're proceeding under the assumption that we can only work with CU to get flood mitigation done. And then if, you know, there would be a different way that we would not have to disrupt wetlands. And I just wanted someone to maybe speak to the fact that most of the wetlands that are going to be impacted are the ones where the actual flood wall is going. That'll be the city using that land, not CU developing that land. But hoped that somebody could clarify whether that is an accurate assumption. I think what the speaker talked about was not accurate, and so just wondering if that could be directed. And then also, is it true that where CU is developing is primarily in a mined out former gravel pit, and any wetlands, which are I think quite minimal there, would have to be mitigated and restored with new wetlands elsewhere on the property?
If not, I will say we can come back to that at another time.
I will, oh, sorry. I will see if we can confirm. I want to make sure that my understanding is absolutely correct as we do this, and we'll see if there is someone who's been more involved than technical boundaries.
Okay, thanks. And then I think back to Kathy Haddock, there were a couple questions up front that I had asked, like that health and safety language. Did we pin down whether that's required to be in there, or can we change that?
It's not required. It's not one of the things that's required to be in an ordinance in the charter. There are legal cases when it's required when you're adopting laws. So you will continue to see it. But Teresa and I talked, well, virtually talked during the meeting, and we can substitute it for something like this ordinance is adopted to place this measure on the ballot as required by Article 5, Section 1 of the Colorado Constitution and Article 4 of the city charter. Does that meet your?
That sounds good to me, as long as there's no legal risk to doing so. Yeah.
I don't think there's any legal risk to doing so.
Great. And then any concerns about that? If no one runs for mayor, do we need to make any changes for that situation to ensure?
Boulder's charter doesn't address if there's no one to run for mayor or if there are not enough candidates to run for the empty council seats.
Great.
And it's a situation that's never happened. There are provisions in state law because it happened in the small towns I used to represent all the time. So if you want us to go to, we can draft another ballot measure for you that would deal with that if you want to. I wouldn't suggest amending one of these because I imagine adding a new section.
Yeah, so if it's already not there for council, I don't think we need to look at it for this year for mayor either. Thanks. That's my opinion.
If anyone wants to make a bet on whether there will ever be an empty mayoral election, I'm happy to put a lot of money down on that particular question.
Attorneys plan for the worst, Aaron. That's our job.
Thanks for raising the issue, Rachel.
While Rachel's asking questions, can I follow up on one other one she had?
Please.
That we also addressed, that you asked about the indentured servitude language, which I had taken out of one paragraph and then added in here. I can't believe I did that. So the sentence currently says in Ordinance 8546 that the term of the mayor, that the mayor shall serve until a successor is elected and qualified. I'd suggest that should be changed to the term of the mayor shall extend until a successor is duly chosen and qualified. And the language is to keep it if, that when the election happens and votes are counted, there's still time before swearing in, and make it clear that the mayor serves even though the elections happened until somebody comes in. And the exact same language is in for council members already. So we can take care of that question too.
Great, thanks, Kathy. Junie, then Lauren, then myself.
Thank you, Aaron. I just had one question. I think you inserted earlier, but I just want to clarify. So you're saying that even though we're going to even year, the campaign finance laws remain the same. They remain as is. Is that correct?
Correct. We are not making any changes to it.
Thank you. That's it. Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Junie. Lauren.
Thank you. I had a question that Celeste Landry brought up regarding, if a council member was elected to mayor, we had talked about that. Then from the council candidates, we would elect 5 instead of 4 candidates. But I thought she brought up a great point of, but people are only voting for candidates. And I was just wondering if we had looked at any examples of where that happens in other cities, or if you guys had discussed that at all.
I agree that it's a legitimate concern. I'm at least so far, I think it's one without a potentially good solution. That if we don't have this language in the charter, and this is not language we are adding, this is language that the voters approved it when they made the direct election of mayor in 2020. I believe we're just moving it to a different place. Maybe we're not even doing that. So just so you know that part. And Boulder charter requires vacancies to be filled by election. So if we don't do it this way, the alternative is to have to call another election and have a special election or wait until the following November to fill the vacancy that's created. I guess you could say that, well, I'm thinking out loud and I probably shouldn't do that. I mean, if you want to put in that if somebody's running for mayor, that people get a vote for 5 council candidates, you don't have ranked choice voting for candidates or for council candidates. So that might skew things if people can vote for 5 rather than 4, anticipating that there might be a vacancy. Otherwise, I mean, I don't think there's an easy solution to it.
Can I colloquy on that, given I led the Our Mayor, Our Choice campaign, and so I can maybe speak to the motives. Do you mind, Lauren? Okay. So the motive behind not allowing some, or why we put in the ballot language not to have someone run for council simultaneously running for mayor when their council term ends at that same election cycle was to give the greatest deference to the electorate and potential candidates. Because if someone's if someone is, if someone's in that state, you don't know if that person's running for re-election. Right? I mean, they're running as an incumbent for council and running for a new seat. Oftentimes, a lot of decisions, and for those of us that recently ran and those that have previously, sometimes based on knowing who is or isn't running for a seat, changes your calculus of whether you choose to run or not. And so by holding a seat sort of held as an incumbent, you might change the calculus of a number of candidates that may want to actually throw their name in the hat because they feel there's maybe a better shot if that seat is vacant versus being held by an incumbent. So making an individual choose which seat they are actually going to seek and choosing one provides clarity not just to the potential candidates, but also to the voters. So we don't run into an issue where they're maybe voting for 4, but then a 5th slips in. So I think there's that's sort of the reason why we did that, was to sort of keep it clean and keep it in a most transparent manner for both voters and potential candidates. And also, we just don't want to make Alicia's work any more complex or hard than it already is in trying to manage that potential chaos. So that was just sort of perspective on our motives for why we had that in the language for 2020.
Thanks, Matt. Lauren, you want to finish up, or did you have more?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, I had a couple questions. One is I wanted to come check in on the question of the number of signatures. We've talked about this a little bit before, but I just wanted to check in on it one more time. So our current requirement for the number of signatures to like get an initiative on the ballot and recall council members and such, they're based on the percent of votes cast in a previous election. And so that will stay true, correct? Like we're not changing those percentage thresholds.
Correct.
And do I remember correctly? It's that it's the last 2 municipal elections that it's based on?
Yes.
And so there've been some concerns raised about that might get too high. Just so we're understanding where that might occur. If even years pass, we're hoping and expecting, those of us who are interested in this approach, to get higher turnout because of the higher turnout in even year elections. So that first one would be 2026. So the first election that might have increased signature thresholds would be going into the 2028 election. Would that be correct? If because 2026 potentially has higher numbers, and then it would apply to 2028.
Right. And just to correct something I said, so that, I mean, you were making the calculation right. It's the past 2 municipal candidate elections. So we're looking at the even year election. So you're calculating it correctly. I didn't say it right.
Thanks. That's what I meant. So thanks for correcting. So it would in 2028, it would be based on the 2026 and 2025 elections at that point, right?
Yes.
Got it. Okay. So I will. Well, we're asking questions here, but thanks for answering that. I'll say something about this a little bit later. The other one, so we're doing a couple things related to the library district. tonight, which is not fundamentally putting the library district on the ballot because that was being done by petition, but some kind of associated measures in case that does pass. Can I ask, or do we have anything scheduled right now for talking about what we might do with funds that would be available if the library district is successful? Nori, that might be a you question.
Yep. Yes, and I apologize as I was typing something. I realized my mic was open. We do. I think that we are thinking of that and working to schedule that with FSC soon. I believe it will be, we haven't scheduled it yet, but we were looking at late September, October-ish to talk about that. But we currently need to figure out what else we have going on in our calendar.
So that's to the Financial Strategies Committee. Do we have a sense of when it might come to council to check in on that?
Oh, I do not believe we have gotten that far. We'll see what the Financial Strategies Committee says, but we knew that odds are we would probably wait until after November to see. Have a full meeting.
Thanks for clarifying. Bob, did you want to weigh in on this before I finish?
Yeah, you prompted. Thanks for that, Aaron. You prompted the question in my mind, and so maybe I'll ask Nuria, if the library district question passes at the county level in November. It was my understanding from earlier presentations that the city wouldn't have the benefit of the money that it currently spends on the library for a year or two, I think, because it would take the library district that long to get up and running and start collecting the property tax. So we'd have to kind of the city would kind of have to loan money to the library district for a couple of years. Is that, do I remember that correctly?
I believe that was kind of the thought as we were moving forward there. The library district has to constitute itself, and until it does, we would be in that position of supporting the library district as that moves forward. But that's where we're going to continue to have those conversations. And in that conversation about how to potentially reallocate the money, we would be thinking about the dates in which that would happen.
Right. So that wouldn't implicate, for example, the 2023 budget, because I think presumably we're going to approve the 2023 budget under the assumption that the city would have to pay for the library expenses, regardless of whether the ballot measure passes or not. Is that for 2023 at least? Is that right?
That is correct. It would not impact next year's budget. And I believe it really wouldn't come into play for the following year, the 2024.
Okay, thanks.
Teresa, did you want to follow up on that?
No, Nuria covered it well. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thanks for answering that. I may send in a request to CAC around that discussion, but that's not a topic for tonight. So thanks for answering that question. Okay, so I think we've gotten all our questions answered. So we can move into deliberations. Of course, we've talked about all these ballot measures in the past, so we don't necessarily need to have a long argument about this one way or the other, or extol the virtues or negatives of all of them. But if people want to put a couple of comments out there, or maybe even a motion, let's move forward. Who wants to start? Nicole.
I'll start. So yeah, I just wanted to mention just a couple of things about the different measures. You all have heard me speak about the importance of social infrastructure before, so I'm really excited to move forward with prioritizing our libraries. I think they can sometimes seem fine on the surface, but one thing I've learned getting a little bit deeper into it is that we really need a lot more investment in our libraries than the city has been able to give. And I'm really eager to see us set our libraries free from city budget constraints. I know it's not technically our ballot measure, but I'm still excited for it. I just want to commend staff for doing a really great job of finding the balance between meeting our needs and making sure that we aren't putting an excessive burden on residents' energy bills. If the climate tax passes, I really look forward to our work to find more equitable ways of generating revenue for climate resilience and furthering this work. And I also am really looking forward to having measurements of progress that community members can use to see how their investments are helping us be more resilient. I'm not going to speak to the CU South referendum tonight, given I work at the university. But for even year elections, when I brought this up at the retreat as a work plan priority, I suspected it would be a really hard issue for our community because it does require a leap of faith from all of us. Just like ranked choice voting, moving our city council elections to even years to increase voter turnout is untested in Colorado. So we're going to be the first. And it's always stressful to try something new. And I hear that stress coming from some members of our community. But already other city councils along the Front Range are having these same conversations because we started them. And that's really good for democracy. And I think it's really cool for Boulder too. The other thing that I'm noticing about some of the dialogue that I'm seeing around even year elections in the past couple of months, and I think this is going to be a harder leap of faith with this ballot measure, and it's that even year elections, considering it, is really requiring us to act on our stated commitments to equity. There is no doubt that the people who are not voting in off-cycle elections are disproportionately people of color, renters, and lower income residents. Some of the commenters brought up that they didn't feel like it was racist to have even year or to have off-cycle elections. But I just want to note for us, we've all learned this in our racial equity training. Racism and classism don't just show up in the explicit actions that we're taking to uphold our privilege. They also show up in the actions that we don't take when we know there are disparities by race and class, and when we fail to take action to correct them. It's really easy for us to talk about our desire to be a community where everyone's voices are equally valued, but moving that talk into action is hard. And what I hear people saying, some folks who are opposed to this change, is that candidates are going to have to run differently and will need to work harder to reach more voters among the noise of the federal and state elections. And I think that that's a very valid concern. So if this measure passes, I hope that we'll consider increasing the amount that council candidates can raise and that the city will match so candidates can do more voter outreach. But all of us who run council campaigns know that making sure candidates can reach more voters in an even year election is a much easier problem to solve than turning out 17,000 more voters. And just to the folks who are concerned about not having enough time to research candidates, I know that those of us who are political insiders are very used to having time to watch all the candidate things, to read every questionnaire. And I hope that we can keep in mind that that experience is not necessarily representative of how most of our community experiences even year elections. Even in odd years, a lot of voters don't have a lot of extra time to watch all of these things and go to all these events. Many of them are filling out their ballot just a couple days before the election, calling their friends, talking to neighbors, doing a quick Google search. They don't follow local issues as deeply as some of us do. And so I think for a majority of voters, their experience isn't going to change. But one thing that I truly hope as we head into election season is that we can avoid making character judgments about the 17,000 voters who are not typically voting in off-cycle elections. They aren't more or less uninformed than those of us who vote in odd years. They're parents, they're hourly workers, they're retirees and renters and students, and they're valued members of our community who deserve a voice. So as we're moving into election season, I really hope we'll remember that in a democracy, when it comes to voting, quantity is quality, and we can just make sure that we are treating all voters with the respect they deserve. And that is everything that I wanted to say in response to the comments. So thank you to everybody who spoke up tonight. Really appreciate it. And I'm really looking forward to voting on these. Erin, can I make a motion or? Well, actually, I don't want to make the motion because I've just abstained from one of the votes. So I will hold off on doing that.
That might be best then. Okay, thanks, Nicole. Rachel, and then Junie, and Mark, and I'll call on myself.
Okay, turns out I actually have a couple more questions, so I'm sorry to be a little bit out of order here. But before somebody makes the motion, if we do want to get that language changed for the CU South annexation, paragraph 5, how does that go into tonight's vote?
Yes, and then we'll yes, and when you do next reading, it will say that.
So it might be helpful in advance, and maybe Mayor Brockett would like to do a straw poll to see if we even want to make that change at some time. I didn't mean to make you turn your camera back on, but if that happens, if somebody,
no worries.
Whoever's going to make the motion, I'm happy to make it at the right time, or happy not to. If somebody could put the language up on the screen, that might be helpful to get us through it if we're making some changes. On the second question I have, I'm supportive of putting that. I guess I'll just go through them one at a time. On 8534 and CU South annexation, reluctantly supportive of putting that on the ballot because we have to do that because the signatures were gathered. Not that I support the petition. I'm a no on that, but a yes, I'm putting it on the ballot. I'm very supportive of us putting the library district question up there, 8539. My next question is for 8540, supportive of the mayoral cleanup going on the ballot, but I am still worried about the concern that Lauren brought up, which is what happens if somebody midway, if I understand the issue, midway through a term, so has 2 years left, runs for mayor and wins. So we have an extra council seat open and people, we don't have ranked choice voting yet for those seats. I don't know if we ever will, but we don't now. Wouldn't we want in that scenario, as Kathy, I think, suggested, that we say, if a current council member is running, let's vote for, sort of an in case number 5, or if 4 council members are running in that scenario, let's vote. No, only one could win. Let's vote for 1 extra, right? Thank you. That math was slow. I am sorry. So I don't know if there's interest in talking through that anymore, but it does seem like we'd rather have people vote on a 5th than not. And then very supportive of putting even year elections on the ballot. One of the concerns that we're hearing over and over tonight, that's 8546, is sort of the notion that there are certain voters who are quality and others who are not. And I find that frankly offensive. Every vote is a worthy vote. And so I hope that as we work through this as a community, we can shy away from language like that. It was the same thing like during the movement for women's suffrage, like people didn't think that they would be informed voters. Same thing with literacy tests, that people were trying to claim that Black voters would not be able to be quality voters. So we really, I think, need to get really far away from implying that anyone's vote is not a quality vote. We are all quality voters and votes. And I'm not trying to stifle people's First Amendment rights, just saying that hits just poorly. And then on, I think it's 8542 climate tax, I'm excited to get that on the ballot, and I hope that the community supports it. Thanks.
Thanks, Rachel. Ginny, Mark, Matt, then I'll go.
Thank you, Aaron. I support putting it all on the ballot as well, and just want to thank staff for all the work, and I look forward to hearing from community. And also, I just want to say thank you so much to Nicole for constantly reminding us of the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And thank you for bringing that forward and shedding a light. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ginny. Mark, Matt, and Aaron.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to speak in opposition to Ordinance 8546, but I want to start by taking extreme issue with the comments of one of my colleagues who suggests that opposition to 8546 is in some way racist. That suggestion is both untrue and inappropriate. This is a policy matter. I have a different view of the policy, and it is not based on racism. And the reasons I oppose it is that this measure, which I'm obviously going to vote against, represents ad hoc governance of the worst kind. There's been little community engagement. We've conducted only a bare bones analysis of the merits of taking this step, and we've ignored the value of the current election system, which provides for a deep and involved conversation between those running for council and those who would elect them. With respect to community engagement, we've done no polling, we've done no mailings, we've published no digital or paper questionnaires to determine the will of the community, and we have conducted no stakeholder meetings or open public houses on the subject. We don't need to. None is needed when we have assumed the conclusion that this is a great proposal. And the idea that we've really vetted the pros and cons of this proposal is, quite frankly, laughable. We know that a minuscule number of cities have moved in this direction, apparently the largest of which is Baltimore, if I recall correctly. So is Baltimore now the lodestar that we follow in making our policy decisions? And how many thousands of cities have declined to take this step? Do we even know that answer? I doubt we do. On a practical level, No one is going to care about local issues and the views of council candidates in a year in which we elect a president, senator, congressman, Colorado House and Senate representatives, and a mayor. Who is going to host and who's going to attend any forum for council candidates? These elections and the discussion of issues of local consequence will become functionally irrelevant. This referendum is being put on the ballot by the council majority, not because it has fully analyzed and vetted the proposal, but because it can. This is the opposite of careful, thoughtful governance. It is merely an exercise of power and nothing more than that. I hope that the voters of Boulder will be more thoughtful. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Matt and me.
Thanks, Aaron. So I'll march through kind of one by one. Yeah, I will. I'll support 8534 getting on the ballot. It's what we have to do. So I don't like it, but it's what we have to do. And I'll also support getting on the ballot and say yes to the 8539. You know, at the end of the day, I support our library district, so this is a no-brainer to me. It is just fundamental that we give our libraries an opportunity to thrive, and we get them out of the table scraps of our budget process. So I think the libraries deserve that opportunity. With regards to 8540, I support that one going forward, and I think, you know, some of the you know, as Kathy said, there's no great solution to the issue. The best solution is actually if we move to single transferable vote proportional representation, which is basically an RCV for council. That's how we solve almost all those issues, along with some of the great solutions that come with the mayor election that we'll be doing next year. So if we want to leave that hanging, then maybe we go through RCV for all of council, and we just make sure we have a fully equitable election system across the board. But I'll sit with that one. With regards to 8546, I want to see this go through. Actually, I'll just skip. I'll come back to that because that'll take a second. And then certainly with regards to 8542 and the occupation tax, this is just good for us. It's good for the environment. It's good for our community as a whole. And it allows us to plan for some of the unforeseen climate impacts that we're going to have and build a more resilient community. So these are just win-win options. So I think this is a great starting place, and this is a good investment for our community. So back to 8546, you know, this is not a question of mechanics. This is a very simple question about whether you feel, or the voters feel, or we on council feel that more people should vote. That's really all it is. The mechanics and how we get there, the path is irrelevant. It's the destination that matters. And the destination is, do we want to lift up the voices of roughly 20,000 people who, by the way, do vote in our municipal elections, because we trust their votes on things like the muni, things like the sugary beverage tax, things like our mayor, our choice. We've trusted their votes for years and even years. So why not trust them to make the same decisions with regards to our council? And so I think that's a fair thing for us to do. These aren't people that are just out of left field, don't pay attention, and we're trying to bring them in. They do pay attention, and they vote in extremely consequential issues for our community. And so I think it's time that we allow them the same right with regards to voting for council and eventually for mayor. So I will see that, love to see that go forward. So I'm a yes all the way through. One thing I would want to just, you know, toss out there is just, and maybe there's a straw poll opportunity for Aaron, is a language question and modification. I know we've talked a little bit, some of us have, with Teresa and Kathy on this, but it is really just a question of consistency. Since we do define in Article 3, Section 22 of the Charter that regular municipal elections shall be held on the same Tuesday in November as the state ballot issue elections, we already define it with regards to state elections. And so I'm wondering why we don't have similar self-consistent language written into the question itself, so that the people voting on this, without question, understand exactly what we're asking of them, that this is going to be an election at the same time as the state election, so that the question is as explicit as possible, especially given we define it as such in our charter. And so it's not extemporaneous or pro-con language, because our charter says it, which isn't pro-con by definition. So I just wanted to throw that out there as something that I would love us to perhaps consider And maybe there's a straw poll for it. And if there's pros and cons, happy that. But I'd love to just see if that's something anyone was willing to entertain. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. So I got myself queued up, and then Nicole, if you don't mind, I'll let Lauren go next, and we'll come to you after other people have had a chance to speak each once in turn. So I'll just be, I won't take too long, but I'm going to go through here really quick. 8534 about the Sioux South annexation, we're required to do it. 8539 on the library district. I'm just thrilled that the petitioners were able to get that on the ballot. I'm looking forward to supporting that and getting a sustainable source of funding for our library. It's an exciting prospect. 8540 this is really charter cleanup stuff, and I think just makes sense. So that's great. 8546 is our even year elections, and I'll just say a couple of words here. Just that we've had some folks calling in saying, well, if it's not broke, why are we trying to fix it? And I'll just say that this is an attempt to make our local elections more inclusive with more people voting, and it's really purely and simply about making a change that has been shown in at least a couple, 3 dozen other cities across the country to dramatically increase voting numbers in local elections. And I thought our representative Judy Mobile said it really well, that each vote matters equally. So I don't feel like there's one vote that matters more than another vote. The power of our democracy, to me, is stronger when we have more people voting. So to me, that's really all it comes down to. It's not about any nefarious motives or strategies or what have you. It's really just about, to me, more people voting is just an inherently positive thing. So I'll just leave that at that. And then and also just, we're not taking any unilateral moves here. We're putting something on the ballot for the voters to consider, right? So this is not a change that we're making on our own. It's a change that we're asking our voters to consider. And I generally trust our voters. I think they show very good instinct. So we'll see what they think of this measure. And then finally, on the 8542, which is about the climate action plan tax. I mean, we all know the existential crisis that climate change presents to us right now, and the recent fires, the Marshall Fire and such, made that incredibly clear. So I think this is a really good move to provide a more stable funding source and a little bit of a higher funding source to make progress on that at the local level. And then just also call out that it does include $1.5 million for wildfire mitigation. And that's the kind of climate resilience move that we need to be making. And it will work, I think, really well in conjunction with this, a new 0.1% wildfire mitigation tax that the county is putting on the ballot as well. So hopefully we can make some real progress on that and keep all of our community members safe with that measure. And I will leave it there. Oh, no, actually, I did want to mention on a couple other things on even year elections. One was just about, there's been some concern about the signature thresholds. And I'll just say that I don't know how we would accurately change the signature thresholds now to kind of change over time as potentially higher voting numbers kicked in over the years. So I think that's a good thing. If this passes, that people should sharpen their pencils and come up with a proposed, alteration to those things that we might put on the ballot in a couple of years or something like that, to keep the signature numbers scaled to get roughly similar numbers required once this fully phases in. So I think we can come back to that if that measure is successful. And the other thing is, I appreciate people raising that kind of concern over, well, if the mayor gets elected from council and then we take the 5th vote getter, how does that work out? Personally, I think it's fine. People would have only voted for 4 council members, but anybody who didn't pick magically the top 4 vote getters, their votes would still roll into picking the 5th person. I think it'll work out fine. I don't think people need to cast a conditional 5th vote in case there's a 5th person put onto the council seat. So all your votes will kind of tally up to rank people in their order. And then per Matt's point, ideally, we could shift to a different form of voting entirely that would resolve all of these issues at some future point. But I think until we get there, it'll work out fine. So that'd be my bit on that. And then once people have had a chance to speak, I'll do a straw poll for Rachel's proposed language change on the Sioux South annexation measure and anything else anybody wants to bring up. Thanks for bearing with me. We got Lauren and then Bob, and then I think everybody will have spoken if I'm not missing anybody, and we'll come back to Nicole.
Thanks, Aaron. So for 8534, like many, I will vote yes, because it's our job. But I would also support the changes that Rachel brought up regarding the modification to the language. For 8539, I would vote yes for having that, and I look forward to voting for the library district. For 8540, yes, I look forward to having that cleanup language on the ballot. I guess I was just wondering if there are any downsides to allowing people to vote for 5 seats if if council members are running for mayor. It's not a make or break in terms of my support on that, but I'm just curious if there's a reason that we shouldn't go that direction. 8542, yes, I am excited to see the climate change and wildfire mitigation tax on the ballot. And 8546, yes, I'm excited to have us put even year elections on the ballot. And I would also support the language change that Matt suggested, and sort of Rachel brought up as well, and Eric, about having the language match our charter and being really clear that, because again, I don't think that the goal, right, is to have elections on even years. The nature of the goal is to align with state and federal elections. And that really seems like what the intention is for the ballot. So that would make sense to me. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob and Nicole.
I guess we're going through all these, so I'll do the same thing. I'll follow suit with my colleagues. So starting at the top 8534, the CU South one, we, again, as we've discussed, are obligated to put that on the ballot. I do support Rachel's change to section 5, and I hope the straw poll supports that as well, which means that probably goes to 3rd reading, which is fine. We've got time. 8539 is the library district. This is not the library district question. Of course, that's put on by the county. This is just cleanup if the library district, I want to be very clear to listeners that this is not the question about library district. This is the question of if the library district, which is a county measure, passes, does the city want to clean up then what things we would have to clean up, for example, get rid of the library commission. So obviously that cleanup is important and necessary regardless of, well, if the voters on the county measure pass that. So that's a fine one. That's just administrative. 8540 relating to coordination with the mayoral election. I think that's fine as clarification. As Matt well knows, this was what it was supposed to say back in 2020. So we're finally getting around to saying what I think Matt's team had wanted it to say, but a Scrivener's error excluded that 2 years ago. So we're cleaning that up. I think that I don't want to lose track of the fact that I think that Kathy had a proposed change in that language. So when we get to voting and amending, I'd like to have Kathy put forward her change. That was kind of the indentured servitude language that I think she wanted to get cleaned up there. 8546, I'll be voting against, as I've said before. I want to enunciate my reasons here for that. I've said my reasons many times. I thought Mark did a good job of enunciating good reasons, and I support what he said. I do want, however, to commend my council colleagues, the majority that will pass 8546, for making a change in the transition a few weeks ago. I think the original version of this in the spring had some transition provisions that I think we're going to make people very uncomfortable. Things like extending the term and so on and so forth, and postponing the mayoral election. So I really want to commend you all for kind of listening to our constituents as they wrote to us and spoke to us, and making it better. I'm still going to vote against 8546, but I think what you're putting forward is a better ballot measure than what was originally being discussed in the spring. So good job, particularly to Rachel for bringing that change forward. And then 8542, I agree with all my council colleagues. This is an important thing to address, not only climate action, but also fire mitigation. The original version of this had the tax being about the same. This is kind of an extension of two taxes and combining them into one, having about the same, slightly lower for residents, slightly higher for businesses. And then, of course, we've now realized that we need to do some more work on wildfire mitigation. So there will be a slight tax increase here. And the nice thing about living in Colorado is tax increases are only by the voters. And I would support it both in putting it on the ballot, but also I will personally vote in favor of this tax, because I think the things that will be done with the money, both on wildfire and on climate action, are super, super important. So I'll be voting a yes on 4 of the 5 and voting no on 8546 for reasons previously stated. Thanks.
Thanks, Bob. Okay, I think I've gone through everybody. So Nicole, you want to put in something additional?
Yeah, I just had a kind of a follow-up to my previous comments and to some comments that some others made. I just want to be sure that when we're talking about issues that have racial disparities, we can understand that we're not engaging in personal attacks by calling attention to those racial disparities. Anybody who's talked to me about racial equity knows that I am the first person to admit that I have racial bias, and they will often hear me even call myself a racist. We're all steeped in racism since well before we're born. It permeates our society, and it has for 400 years. None of us here supports racism. And it's a fact that many systems in our country were set up to make sure that white people would always maintain power over people of color. And when we see big differences in anything between white people and people of color, whether it's incomes or homeownership or voting turnout, that's like a blinking red light, calling our attention to the fact that racism is likely involved in creating that discrepancy. So we don't always have to make racial equity the basis of our decisions. I do, but I don't expect that others will too. We talked last month about how we can and we should disagree on issues because it's healthy and it makes us come up with good decisions. And as a city that values racial equity, we also have to be able to talk about those places where racial disparities exist. And I hope that you all realize that when I'm talking about those racial disparities, I'm not judging any of our characters. I'm just trying to help us see that there's a potential equity problem that we really need to be paying attention to. So I hope that clarifies my intentions a little bit. I really do have a lot of respect for all of you. I do not think anybody is out there intentionally trying to perpetuate racism in our community or anything like that. I really just think it's important that we're able to have these conversations and point out these places where disparities exist so that we can further our racial equity goals. And I'm happy to talk offline with anybody who would like to talk a little bit more or anybody who is just feeling a little bit hurt by what I said earlier. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Nicole, for clarifying. Let's see, Teresa, do we need, I'm seeing something in the chat about maybe we need some clarification about, could you weigh in, please?
Yes, I'm happy to, Mayor. So as council is probably aware, there's a go dark period that's triggered once we take the vote to put these things on the ballot. And so to align those dates, I think there are a couple things that need to happen tonight. I think anything that is going to be unchanged, we want to continue to a future meeting. Anything that you want to see amended, it would be helpful for us to have clear direction. So a vote to amend would, a motion and vote to amend would be really helpful so that we can bring those items back to you when the others are continued.
So let me see if I understand what you're saying. Is that you're saying that we need to do final adoption of all of the ballot measures on the same day so that we have the same go dark period for all of them. And in order to do that, the ones that are getting no modifications, we should continue because otherwise they go into effect immediately. We pass them right now. And the ones that need amending, we should go ahead and amend on second reading and then bring them back for a third reading. At the same time, we would consider the continuation of the ones that are not being changed.
You got that exactly right.
Does that make sense to folks? I'm seeing some a little bit of uncertainty. But so, okay, I think what it comes down to is if we're going to amend any of these, let's get a vote to pass them as amended tonight. If there are any that we are not going to amend, let's just continue.
Well, I'm sorry, Mayor, a clarification. I don't think we want to pass them as amended. I think we just want to know what those amendments are.
So let me just ask, don't we need
Or you could provide direction about how you want them amended, I suppose.
So if we aren't passing them as amended, would you bring them back on consent in a week? Because we still need 2 more readings, right, if we're amending them.
Is it 2 more readings or just 1?
Well,
Kathy?
we need to pass them as amended and then come back for yet another 3rd reading, 10 days or more later.
My mistake. Thank you.
Kathy, do I have that right?
Yes, I'm not the expert on that, but I think you all are saying it right. And what we often do for ballot measures is just bring them by emergency at the last meeting anyhow, just because we run into this and we run into, people wanting to keep perfecting. So we can handle it any way you want to. We do have a way to get across the finish line, no matter how easy it is to set it up now. So if you just want to continue them all with directions for what you want changed, we will make sure they all are effective when they're supposed to be.
Thanks for clarifying. I will just say personally, I would prefer to not pass things on emergency if we don't need to. Because it can sometimes feel differently to community members when you pass things on emergency if it's something they don't agree with. So I would hope that we could do it in such a way that we don't have to do that, would be my hope. And I think we have time. Ginny and then Bob.
I just have a question or comment. Again, I'm still worried about community and how they're gonna perceive some of the changes that we're making tonight. And I think I heard earlier from Kathy that the current language in the CU South referendum matches the language in our charter. So the changes that we will be making today, will they be in line? So that's something that I'm concerned with, because we can make changes, but if it's not something that is supported by the charter, then what are we doing here tonight as well?
Right. And I'm sorry if I was confusing, because I think maybe 2 concepts were mixed up in there. The change that we're talking about making in the ordinance about the CU ballot language is just to the reasons why council is putting this on the ballot. So it's section 5 of the ordinance. And I did want to double check to see if the charter required specific language. And it does require specific language in ordinances, but this is not one of the things. So that's why I proposed that you can change it rather than public health, safety, and welfare. You're doing it because of constitutional provisions in the charter. The other part of your question may be, if I'm understanding it right, that the actual language that will appear on the ballot, we took precisely from the referendum petitions, not from the charter.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for clarifying, Bob.
Yeah, Aaron, I just wanted to agree with you. I think what you suggested is the right process. I think we should amend tonight anything that's going to be amended. And that way we've kind of buttoned everything down and everyone's kind of where they're going to be. And then we'll bring back, and I agree with you also on emergency. I don't think that's necessary here. If we were running out of time, emergency might be necessary, but I don't think that's the case. Then we bring all 5 of these back at some date in late August or early September, whenever the county clerk says she needs to have this stuff done to us. Presumably it's all done by consent, and I trust my council colleagues that we won't fiddle with these anymore after tonight. I think we've done a good job of talking these things through, and Rachel and Kathy had some good suggestions on some changes. I think we can talk about one from Matt, and let's just get this stuff buttoned down tonight, park it, come back to it in a couple of weeks, and then we'll be done with it.
Thanks, Bob. That makes sense to me. Nuria?
Yeah, Councilman, so I appreciate the conversations. I just wanted to make a couple clarifications. I hear from our clerk that ballot items are affected immediately, so they do not require to be passed on emergency. And perhaps what I would say is we're thinking about the timeline. If it seems that there is one ordinance that particularly the CU South language that is wanting to be amended. If you give us direction on that, we could perhaps not vote on that, and we'll continue that second reading on August 18th. We have time set aside for that, and then do a 3rd reading on September 1st. And then we can move forward in that direction, because we have those 10 days between August 18th and September 1st to come back.
Thanks for that, Nuria. Just to clarify, while you don't while it would go into effect immediately, you would still need a third reading if you had amended it on second reading, right? So, and the only way around that is to pass by emergency. But I think so. We still need to allow a past second reading and then 10 days to elapse and then pass it on a third reading, I believe.
Yep, if you vote on the amended language tonight, though, then I think that we can just do that third reading on this on September 1st.
Right, or to your, just the point you just made, you could bring the language back on consent on the 18th for second reading, amended second reading, and then we'd still have 2 weeks before September 1st when we could pass it on third reading. It would go into effect immediately and still comply with the time.
Exactly.
So this would be the suggestion then that I would make to my colleagues tonight, is that we do a straw poll for amendments that we would like to see. For any particular measures, give that direction to staff on those particular ones, have them bring back the amended versions and the unamended versions in a week on the 18th on consent, because we will have talked it all through tonight. We can vote for all of them, and you can vote no on the ones you really don't want to pass through, but we can do it on consent. You can pick which ones to vote yes or no on. And then we would still have 2 weeks for it to come back for final third readings for the ones that have been amended on September 1st. Does that work for everybody? Okay, great. I'm getting nods. I'm not seeing any thumbs down. So then let's move to, can we just get the specific proposals for the amendments? If we can get those back out on the table for the people who proposed them, and we'll straw poll them. And Rachel, I'll turn to you because you had the first one, I believe.
You want me to pitch my straw poll item?
Just describe it, I think. Maybe a couple of sentences in support.
Okay, so I'm gonna pull this language back up. Give me 1 second. On the ordinance on CU South, I want us to change the language that currently says this ordinance is necessary to protect the public health, safety, and welfare of the residents of the city and covers matters of local concern. To be edited, you can leave, we would maybe leave in that last clause. It sure does cover matters of local concern, but insert instead language as Kathy has suggested, that it is a requirement for us to place it on the ballot, or whatever the best language is there.
Kathy, do you want to repeat? You had words, I think, before, what those were.
I did. This ordinance is adopted to place this measure on the ballot as required by Article 5, Section 1 of the Colorado Constitution and Article 4 of the City Charter, and covers matters of local concern. I hadn't read that before. I just added it for Rachel.
Thanks.
So we take out what's there and substitute what I just read.
I like it. Do I need to give any more?
I think it's good. It feels fairly self-explanatory to me. So let's do a show of hands for people who'd like to pursue that amendment. Right, I'm seeing most people, almost everybody, 7. So Kathy, if you wouldn't mind crafting that amendment for next time.
Okay, thank you.
And then the next one was, I believe, Kathy, you mentioned that you think there needs to be some language changed to correctly get the no indentured servitude.
Right. And what it is changing the last sentence of section 14. And actually, maybe, I think I might have been disabled. Do you want to see it? Would it be easier to see it?
Sure. If you can specify which ordinance you're talking about, please.
Okay, I have to first pick the right screen. It's 8546. And it's on what's on the screen. So the one I just read for 8534, nothing's on your screen yet, right?
No, we're seeing it.
You are? Oh, okay. I just can't see that you're seeing it. Okay, so Ordinance 8534 is the one that we just did with Rachel. The change to Ordinance 8546 about the indentured servitude is to say that the term of the mayor shall extend until a successor is duly chosen and qualified.
Great. So that's to be clear that it's the term that has to be that will extend, not the person, and so the person is not bound to serve the term.
Exactly.
All right. Show of hands for all who'd like to see this change. Oh, lost everybody there. That's everybody, I think so, or almost everybody. Strong majority, anyway. I think the last one was Matt. You were I think you put some language in the chat. Do you want to talk to what you were suggesting?
Yes. Let's see. Let me share it with Kathy, and then it can get up there too. I love being able to see it. That's the good stuff versus talking through the language, right?
Is it coming by email or what?
It is coming through the chat, so it's just straight off the top. Boom. Okay, there it is. So I'll just sort of describe, as was sort of described earlier in Article 3, Section 22, we define regular municipal elections as, basically as being aligned with state ballot elections. And so since we define it as such, I feel that in the current language, it's helped to be really clear to the voter that we're not just changing to any part of the even year. Now, granted, in the ordinance, it states that, but it's better to be as explicit in the question rather than letting them have to read further to know what exactly they're getting. So instead of just any time in an even year, we're stating very explicitly that it is aligning with the state and federal. And I know I want to be conscious about any sort of extemporaneous and sort of other types of language, and that's why this was sort of crafted not to do that. And so the way I was really adapting it was to say, shall sections 5, 14, and 24 of the Home Rule Charter be amended to change the regular municipal election to align with the state and federal election dates beginning in 2026, and then effectively leave the language pretty much as is. I mean, I was using the word shorten. Kathy was saying implemented the transition by reducing the terms. That stuff to me is mostly the same. The important part was getting rid of specifically saying even years and saying that no, this is to align with state and federal, which implicitly is even years. And so that way it's a lot more clear to the electorate, but also consistent with how we define regular municipal elections in our charter.
So Kathy and Teresa, do you want to, thanks for that, Matt, appreciate you explaining it. Kathy and Teresa, do you want to weigh in on that at all? Do you have any thoughts on that?
We have brought up a concern that, well, one, we're not going along with the federal election dates. They are at the same time, but we're specifically saying, and the reason for this is, it used to be that some charters said that elections are the first Tuesday in November. And a lot of other places, it said they're the first Tuesday after the first Monday. So there are some years where those were two different dates. So it was very confusing. So that's why we're saying it the same date as the state ballot issue, so that if we ever have, the first of the month on a Wednesday, that we have everybody's having their election on the same Tuesday in November, even though it's not the first Tuesday after the first Monday. So that's why we did that language. So we can change it to say that the date we're changing it to is the same date as the state ballot issue election. Can't say we're doing it. I'm concerned that saying because of it or in order to or anything else gets to the arguments for or against. So that was our concern, that by saying we are doing this for the purpose of getting to the same as state or federal is an argument for or against. So if you want to say we're doing it on the same date as the state ballot issue, so we don't have elections on 2 Tuesdays in November, we can do that.
So Kathy, if I can respond there. So you're saying that you would feel comfortable if you said, should we change it to the same November date as the state elections?
Right. Exactly the same way that it is in the charter amendment itself.
Matt, what do you feel about that particular approach?
I mean, it gets us closer. I'm not a lawyer, so I using the word align to me seems seems benign. Pardon the rhyme there. I know, yeah, it's 9:19. I gotta have a little levity. So I if that's somehow a pro-con word, so be it. I don't see how it could possibly be construed as much other than it's talking about functionally what it is. It's alignment. So I would be okay if we found something along those lines, just so that we made sure we were connecting the dots on that. I'd love to get some thoughts of other colleagues that were interested in this kind of modification, what they feel on it. But I think that does get us closer to being clear to the voters if we can state that that's aligned with state the federal has to be stripped out because of some funky definition, so be it.
Well, Nicole, and then I'll call on myself.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the language that Kathy is suggesting sounds just fine to me. I think just making it, crystal clear. We're talking about the same Tuesday as the state elections. So anyway, just wanted to give support to what Kathy is saying here.
Yeah, and I'll call on myself here. That Matt, I appreciate where you're going, so I think it's good to go in that direction. I would use the language, roughly the language that Kathy would propose to make sure we're following along with the guidelines. So generally some nodding. So Matt, are you okay if we modify your proposal as Kathy suggested?
Yeah, I trust the professional wordsmiths to figure out the right way, as long as we add sort of where we're headed. I'd love to sort of see how that gets massaged in place. So I know wordsmithing live is always fraught with trouble. So I'll trust Teresa and Kathy to figure out the right way to make that work. So thank you.
Great, Jeannie.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add a thought that these amendments are coming back anyway, right? Next week, next Thursday. So none of them are final. So we're just giving nods to go forward, bringing, nod to staff to make these amendments, but bring both versions back. So maybe next Tuesday, we might look at it and change our minds and go back to the original.
Exactly. Thanks for clarifying, Jeannie. Yep, that's right. Good. Which is, I think, a good thing about the approach that we're taking. So I appreciate Kathy and Teresa and others who guiding us to this approach. So all in. Let's do a straw poll here. Then all in favor of the change Matt is suggesting as altered by Kathy with her proposed approach. All right, we got 7, I think, there for that. So good support for that too. All right. Did anybody have any other proposed changes to these? All right, Lauren.
And I don't know exactly how this fits in, but just the change around potentially allowing people to vote for 5 seats if a city council member was running for the mayoral seat as part of 8540. But if that adds a new section or causes too much complication at this point in the process.
So Lauren, if you don't mind me just responding, the concern I would have about doing that now is that might have implications for the county clerk and how they make the ballots. Mm-hmm. So that they might say, oh, sure, that's no problem. Or they might say, oh, whoa, that's a big problem. So I would worry about moving that forward without vetting it with the county clerk.
That's fair.
I'm not trying to suppress your idea. I'm just, that's.
Can I kind of colloquy a little bit? Somewhat related is there's a few items that are kind of left on the table regarding election stuff that we will probably in some form have to come back to down the road. And so I think I'd certainly love to just ask my council colleagues if there's an interest in the next year or so lifting up an election committee to kind of address some of those, right? We talked about a blue ribbon for fair pay. I think we will have to address this, perhaps some of this ballot signature pieces when we get there. So and this might be a piece certainly with Nicole, with Lauren's point that's maybe something with a little bit more review might be worth considering down the road. And certainly maybe if we're interested in proportional representations, I think there's a slurry of things that I think might be helpful to get a group together to really help give us some insight. And so I just want to make sure for everybody that there's a way we can package some of these pieces that don't have to be dealt with tonight, but can certainly be shifted into sort of a large package of asks from a working group to help give us some guidance.
Thanks for that, Matt. I guess I just turned to Nuri a little bit. Like, I think that sounds like a great idea, but we probably aren't making that decision tonight.
I would hope not. I think that's one of those decisions that I would say is not on the work plan, and depending on what the scope, we would come back and have an appropriate nod. But I certainly take note of it, and I believe that we can talk about it in the future in that vein. I know I'm the I'm the downer of it all.
No worries. Nicole?
The voice of reality, Nuria. Thank you. I just want to say, I think for right now, I'm not supportive of making that kind of change at almost 9:30 at night, not sort of having really thought about it all that much. I do think, this is something, it's future councils can take a whack at this too, right? If we head down a path and it's just not working. Anyway, this feels like it's in good shape to me.
Thanks, Nicole. Lauren, are you all right if we come back to this at some future date rather than moving it forward tonight?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. All right. Well, so I think we're about done here. It's a little bit underwhelming because we're not actually going to vote on anything tonight. But just to be clear, again, here's what we're looking at. We've got 3 of these items that have minor amendments that will be coming back to us in a week with specific language to implement those minor amendments. We will, at that time, vote. They'll come back on consent because we've all talked it through already. If we think the amendments weren't quite done right, we can bring it up and talk it through at that time. If they just look great, we'll vote on those on the consent agenda. And again, if for those council members who do not like any one of those, they can vote no on the consent agenda on those items at that time. Then 2 weeks after that, on September 1st, all of the ballot measures will come back to us for final adoption, and just in time, not by emergency, just in time to move them on to the county clerk in a timely fashion. And again, you'll have the opportunity to vote no if you so choose on any of them. Does that work for everybody? Great. Teresa?
Mayor, I would suggest at this time you entertain a motion to continue the items that are.
I'm entertaining. Sort of.
So moved.
Motion to continue.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. All in favor? Just raise your hands for this one, I think. Yeah. Is that right, Alicia? Yeah. It'll be a roll call when we get there, but continuation is a show of hands. Okay, thanks for, well, let me just say, I really appreciate all the community members coming to speak to us about this and all the people who've helped shape this policy as we move it forward. And that was a very productive discussion, everyone, and that got a little complicated at the end. And I admire how you all moved through it productively. So big thanks to everybody. All right, we have one other thing. So Rachel, you had sent something out on email. It was past CAC, so we didn't amend the agenda. I don't know if we have an action item here, but if you want to just mention what you were thinking, we can talk about it.
We'll make another pitch. So at the retreat, we gave as one of our work plan items to develop a day shelter and day services for the city of Boulder for people experiencing homelessness. And as part of that, we greenlit doing engagement with stakeholders. And at the time, I had asked that we maybe include 1 to 2 council members as participants in that stakeholder work group. And I just found out over the weekend that work group was coming together and already scheduling meetings. So I talked to Kurt a bit about, how would we maybe include council members? And I see Vicky's got her camera off, but knowing that the dates are, I want to say like 2 weeks out and maybe not during work days, I just wanted to flag it and see what we wanted to do for getting people assigned from council to that. I don't know if it's a subcommittee. I don't know what the formal, I'd probably turn to Teresa for that question, what the formal mechanism is, but I think that it would be open to the public and anybody could watch. But in terms of participants, I think we need to designate probably by a not a 5 or a vote. I forget. So if it's, who would be participating in that? And I'm hoping Vicky can tell us the dates and we can see who's even available and then who's interested.
Great. And so let me say, I'm going to go to Vicky for a quick status update, and then I'm going to check in on what we're allowed to do tonight without a formal agenda item. So, so Vicky, if you don't mind, give us a quick status, and thank you for staying with us tonight to weigh in on this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, and good late evening. Vicki Ebner, HHS Senior Operations Manager. Thank you, Rachel, for bringing that to the forefront. We are moving ahead with a consultant The consultant is doing a matrix of services that help us gather stakeholder input. There are two of that matrix. There are two meetings that are geared toward a variety of stakeholders, and they will be open to the public. And so the consultant has 2 dates identified, and we would love to know which council members would like to be invited to those meetings. The first one is on the 24th of August from 5 to 6:15. And the second one is on the 25th of August from 12 p.m. to 1:15 p.m.
Thanks for that, Vicki. And then I think we can talk this through a little bit tonight, but maybe Teresa, you could weigh in. Like, are we allowed to designate anybody tonight, given that this wasn't a formal agenda item, or how would this work? Or maybe Nuria, whoever's the right person to address that.
I'll defer to Teresa. I mean, my thought is these are meetings that are open to the public. The question is if there are 1 or 2 council members, and frankly, Rachel, this is a great reminder as we're now tracking some of the items that have come up. We had, this was an oversight on our part as we were thinking about it post-retreat. So appreciate you bringing it to our attention and thinking about if there are 1 or 2 council members who want to be formally invited to participate. I don't know what you've done in the past in terms of taking a vote, or if that's a nod of 5 to move that forward the way it's been entitled. I don't know that we need a formal subcommittee to form it versus who are the 1 or 2 members who want to move forward in participating in. If you do have 2 members, I think it automatically becomes a subcommittee, which means that any meeting at which you are coming forward, then that becomes a designated public meeting that needs to be noticed. And so I want to note that as well.
Although,
and then procedurally, I'll just add that in our council procedure rules, under agenda items, matters from the mayor and members of council include appointments of boards and commissions. And so I would say that this falls in line with those sorts of things, so you all can take formal action.
Great. Okay, and I'll just say that Nuria, like I think in the past, when council members have been invited to attend by staff, that has been deemed not the formation of a formal subcommittee. So maybe I think that's a little bit different if it takes that form. Anyway, so maybe what we could do, Rachel, is look and see if 1 or 2 council members are interested in participating, because I for one would welcome council members getting involved if they would like to. So does anybody want to raise a hand and say they're interested? Yeah, I got Rachel and I got Nicole. We got Matt. Okay, so we got 3 people, and then I'll turn to Vicki. I think I think if we designate 2 people, I think we're going to need open meetings here. Do you feel like that would be an impediment to the work that you're doing on that committee to have it, on a Zoom meeting versus, that's publicly noticed?
I think that I mentioned there was a matrix of different things that we're doing. There are some separate meetings that are really targeted to the service providers that are likely to be providing these services. And those are really focused on the components of any kind of sheltering, any kind of services, and that it's a bit of a controlled population on that one. And then there's also a lot of work that's being done to get the voice of the people with lived experience separate from a meeting situation. So there's lots of surveys and interviews that are happening. And so I think these 2 particular meetings, if they're open for public, even if you go through a notice process, I don't necessarily think that it would harm the overall product.
Right. And I certainly would love to see these sorts of things done in public regardless. I'm glad to hear that. We got Rachel, then Nicole.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I strongly support public, no matter the outcome as well. And a question, I was told that the time was something different, that some of the providers had different times than what you stated, Vicki. So I just want to make sure that we're doing apples to apples. I wrote down from what you said, August 24th, 5 to 6:15, but I think some people were told August 24th, 2 to 3:15. So I want to make sure that I don't know if that's like a.
That's the service provider meeting that I was talking about, that organizations such as Mother House or any other particular sheltering type of organization or service providers that might be housed within the service center have been invited to those meetings. The times I gave you were specific to public stakeholder meetings.
Okay, and I guess I would think that we would want to be included because those are, stakeholder meetings where they're going to be talking about some nuts and bolts. And I would have thought that whoever participates would be involved in those too. So maybe that's I don't know if it's a question for us or you and Kurt. Yeah, so.
I'll just add this, just to think about, and again, although it's coming up soon, we can have further conversation of it. The consultant, I believe, has advised that the provider meetings really be private, that they provide some space for the provider community to really, and Vicki, correct me if I'm wrong in this, to really have some candid conversations of what that's moving forward. And that would be preferable as we move that forward. If we have council members on it, we just need to know that then becomes public, and that will change what our consultant has advised us moving forward. There are broader conversations to be had with community, and certainly council members can participate in their individual capacity as well, although it still has the same rules. It would be considered a public meeting. And so, Vicki, just let me know if I've gotten anything wrong in that.
No, I think that's right. The consultant wanted some targeted meetings really to take advantage of the expertise of some of these service providers. They know what the gaps are in the community. They know what their staffs are capable of taking on. And so really wanted to have some of those focused meetings.
Okay. So
Rachel, are you okay with council participation only in the ones that are sort of recommended to be public?
Maybe. I also wonder if we could just get, information on all the times it might be relevant, and then it would be like people who are interested could block it off on their calendars, and then we could notice this for next week as something that we're going to decide on, because then Tara would be back too, and I have a feeling she might be a fourth that would raise her hand, and we wouldn't be excluding her from this discussion.
Vicki, you're muted.
I presume
I was toggling between screens.
I was just going to say that I presume that we can offer up all the timeline and the kind of meetings that we're going to have and what that looks like, so that we can have a different kind of conversation next week.
Absolutely. And of course, everything that's coming out of these sessions, we will be putting together in a report. Where our goal is the September 1st meeting with our annual homelessness update. Obviously, we'll be a little premature to have a formal report, but we can at least provide council with some of the feedback that we've gotten. And then the consultant will be putting together a full report with all of the information that's included that we'll make sure that council receives.
Great, thanks. So I'm hearing an updated request to get all the exact times and dates and things like that. And then all of us, we could check back in on this again next week with that additional information to finish this out. Is that right, Rachel? Great. Nicole, did you have something else there?
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions, and just first of all, a comment that if I'm remembering from our January discussion at the retreat, I think when we had talked about this, we really had envisioned a council member or two being present throughout the meetings. And I think the other thing we were looking for was a list of the providers who were going to be participating in this. But I think what I'm mostly interested in at this point is what are the providers interested in? Would they like to have a discussion that's just them? Because if that's the case, then I kind of feel like it may be good for us to stay out of it. I'm also just thinking about meetings that I've been in where there's been kind of a group discussion and then some other folks kind of come in at the end. So just as another alternative for how this, could potentially be done if the providers would like to be there and the consultants saying, no, it really needs to be just a provider conversation. Anyway, and then I think my other question was, if there's just one of us there, does it have to be public still? No, if it's just one, then it doesn't have to be public at all. And so I would be, I trust you all. I would be willing to step out and not be present if that could help it be a little bit better. But I think when we had talked about it, at least I had not sort of envisioned this as like we would be actively participating in the discussion, just more sort of present so that one of us would have the information that's being discussed. So I don't know if that made it clear or not, but some other alternatives and me just offering to step back if that can help make it be not public.
Thanks. Rachel?
Appreciate those points, Nicole. I guess it seems to me like it's going to be, I always like things to be transparent and public. So generally that's going to be better. And we're also going to get better buy-in if people don't feel like we are having secret meetings. So I would just encourage us to be public, and also just sort of in stepping back a little bit. And I'm just hearing for the first time sort of how siloed some of this sounds. And I don't know if that's a harsh word or not, but want to make sure that individuals with lived experience will be inside each of those silos.
So the consultant talked to some of the different outreach people and based on some of their previous experience, felt that it would be way more comfortable for people experiencing lived experience to not be in a group situation, not to be put on the spot in a major public meeting. They thought that it would be easier for the people with lived experience to be participatory in a series of interviews and surveys and real genuine one-on-one conversations.
And I can get that, but there maybe could still be a representative of someone with lived experience at like the providers meetings.
I would have to double check, but I believe one of the providers meetings has a service provider who also happens to have some lived experience included.
Okay, Matt, and then maybe we'll see if we're wrapped up here.
Just since I had raised my hand in interest, but I want to clearly defer to the knowledge and expertise and full trust in Nicole and Rachel to handle whether it's two or one. My pulling my name out doesn't change my life. My interest in this it is still very much there, but very capable hands. So we don't need to worry about filling two with three people. It's between the two of them, and we can sort that out going forward. So just want to be clear on that.
Thanks, Matt. We've got a bunch of team players here. You love to see it. Okay. Well, so I guess we will hear more next week, get some, or maybe some information in the interim, and then touch back to it.
Can I just say, Mayor, and I don't want to belabor the point, and I don't want to ascribe ill or erroneous intent in saying this, but I just want to be very clear that the intent is not to be not transparent, honestly. The intent is to provide a avenue and a forum for candor on issues that are complex and difficult and are often very personal as we move forward. And we are certainly open to continuing conversations with providers, continuing certainly conversations with those with lived experience and with our consultant to make sure that we're trying to create a forum and an environment for good dialogue and conversation. It is never an intent to have lack of transparency or backroom meetings. And so I just I just want to say that out loud because I don't want folks to go away with the notion that we're trying to hide anything as much as really thinking about how do we get the most open expression of what is happening. And I realize that we may all differ on how that moves forward, and that there is also power in shedding light and in opening meetings. And we try to do that very much as a city. But we also want to be paying particular attention to perhaps some of the comments from our consultant and our provider community who have expressed that they'd like an opportunity to engage in not so much of a public setting, or an and/or as that moves forward in the future.
Understood. All right. Thanks for clarifying. But yeah, I don't think anybody thought anyone was trying to hide things, but it's important to clarify. Okay, so I think that brings us to the end of our agenda and our +1 agenda item. Alicia, we have anything else we need to address?
No, sir, that's a wrap.
Good. Any final comments from anybody? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and gavel us closed at 9:45 p.m. Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for
Good night, everyone.
Good night.